the Hagmann Hagmann Report for today. It is Tuesday, November 25th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my son, co-host, fellow investigator, fellow researcher, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible programming live in color. We go well beyond the headlines, well beyond the bylines, the fog of disinformation, misinformation, misdirection, and misdirection is what you're seeing today. Misdirection away from what's really important, what's really going on behind the pepper fog, the smoke screen, the smoke bombs, the tear gas of Ferguson. We look beyond that to bring you the news behind the news, what's really taking place. It's all an illusion. It's stagecraft, folks. Stagecraft. For new listeners, thank you very much for checking in with us. Our home base is Hagmann.com. That's Hagmann, Hagmann, and that's the word and, Hagmann.com, Hagmann. That's our home base on the Internet. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. That's right, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. We also have a special weekend edition with the Weekend Vigilante Sheila Zielinski on Saturday. Very proud of that edition as well. Folks, you're listening to one of the, based on numbers, one of the fastest growing Internet shows out there today. And we like to think it is because we bring you what we believe to be the truth. We let you, we vet it as much as possible. But certainly all glory is not ours. It goes to God, and certainly it's because of your listenership, your word of mouth, your spreading the word about the show, your help, your prayers. It's really all because of you as well. So we want to thank you for all of that. I want to say hello to Karen listening live in Rome. God bless you so much for the hoops you've got to jump through in order to listen to this show live in Rome, Italy, where it's a very late or a very early time in the morning. And also to Ken in Birmingham. And we also have, believe it or not, a Ken in Binghamton. So I was looking at that. I thought my eyes were going bad. And Mark, Ron, Rhonda, and Annie from California, Oklahoma, Idaho, and all the way to Rhode Island. So thank you so much for listening. We've got generally Tuesdays with Stan. Stan usually appears in the second hour to give us his update. Given the fact that this is a holiday week, and there were some few urgent things popping up, Dave Hodges is going to be on with us with the second 2 hours of the show tonight. Hopefully, by the way, and I'll tell you what, with the weather changes, people with arthritis know that weather changes, and back problems and bone problems and all that. You've got to know how that affects the way you feel. So, hopefully Stan's not suffering too badly. I'm not saying he is at all. I'm just saying that I know how I feel. And both him and I have similar problems. And I'll tell you what, man, it's like, you get run over by a bus. But, and I just want to thank Katie and others who, Brandy and, my goodness, others who have sent essential oils and, the herbal remedies, because they do help. I've got to tell you flat out, they do help for osteoporosis, arthritis, things like that, things of that nature. They do minimize the swelling and, my goodness. But anyway, all that said, Joe, it's great to have you in the studio. I know you were here early, and we actually got to break bread together this evening, which is something that it's always good to do, what we're going to do now, we do have our first hour guest, Mr. Andy Hoffman. I'm going to bring him on right now. He is the marketing director of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, one of the nation's largest bullion dealers in business for over 25 years. Andy writes a free blog every day at milesfranklin.com, also hosts 3 to 5 podcasts per week,
and all of the last 3 years of his archived work can be found at the website, milesfranklin.com. Mr. Hoffman, it's great to have you on the show.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be here, and everything you said in the beginning about smokescreen and tear gas, etc., just substitute Ferguson with financial world, and that's exactly what I write about every single day, and I've been doing so for nearly a decade.
I've followed your work. I know who you are, and I do admire your research skills and really cutting to the bone on the financial world. One of the things that Joe and I were talking before the show, and a lot of people don't know this. Now we had a show last night. We had David Morgan on last night with Steve Quayle talking about the precious metals. But one of the things that we didn't cover, and hopefully you'll be able to cover today, is something that kind of is hanging in the background, is the Swiss gold referendum. And I know you're on top of this, but why don't we take it wherever you want to go? First of all,
right. And so the listeners understand, I worked 15 years on Wall Street, buy side, sell side. I spent a long time at Solomon Smith Barney. I left the industry a decade ago. I can't believe it'll be a decade in February. I worked for mining companies, et cetera, and now I've been working solely in the precious metals industry, which I've been writing about and investing in for the past decade. Now, what you're referring to is, it's a very opportune time for me to have my first appearance, because this coming Sunday, meaning just 4 days from now, is perhaps the most important election in our lifetimes. And I don't just mean the Swiss people's lifetimes, I mean everyone that's sitting on this planet. Because what the Swiss people are going to be doing via their direct democracy method, where they vote on specific referendums, is to vote as to whether they will reinstitute essentially a gold standard in Switzerland. The Swiss franc was the last currency on the planet to be backed by gold until they joined the evil forces of the Western world around the turn of the century. And they have the ability to save themselves by buying gold again, and by preventing their central bank from selling gold ever again. And I do believe that there's a good chance that this will pass. And if it does, it's going to be a gigantic, if you think that the Catalonia vote was a gigantic smack in the face of Europe and Spain specifically, this will be a smack in the face to the central banks that have been destroying our lives for decades. And I think, just this week, you've seen announcements that the Dutch announced that they secretly repatriated some gold. The French, Marine Le Pen, who is probably going to be the next president of France, made a giant statement today in telling the Bank of France that they need to repatriate their gold and start buying. So I think a chain reaction that's been long coming may well start this Sunday. And everyone needs to keep their eyes on this, because the financial world as we have known it, this evil monstrosity, which has benefited the 1% at the expense of all else, could very well, receive a death blow if there's a yes vote on Sunday.
All right. Well, Andy, let me be fair to you. I kind of threw that question out there as kind of an opening question, but is that where we should start? Here we are. It's 2014. It's November, almost December. We're days away from Black Friday, and of course all of the retail for the upcoming holiday season will be somewhat determined by the sales here this coming weekend. And assuming
there's no nor'easter that knocks out the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't mean to be presumptuous by throwing the Swiss referendum out there in the time we have for tonight, the hour that we have for tonight. Certainly we can cover whatever you want to cover, but I thought that was just most people don't have no clue about that. And you're right. Just reading what you have. Listening to what you've said and reading some of the things that you've written, and by the way, folks, you can find Andy Hoffman's articles at Miles Franklin. That's milesfranklin.com. But is that where you want to start, or you take us by the hand and give us kind of an update of start us out wherever you want to start.
Well, look, what it comes down to, no matter, we've been brainwashed now for several generations because this is the first time in history, going back to 1971, where the world attempted a fiat currency regime for the entire world. We've had dozens of them. In fact, there's been 599 currencies that have failed throughout history. In fact, the only fiat currencies that have not failed throughout history were the ones that were acquired through war. If you were taken over, you lost your currency. Otherwise, you lost it to inflation. But in 1971, the world was on a quasi-gold standard until we reneged on it because we wanted to pay for all our war costs and social programs. And the world had a chance to save itself back then, like the Swiss do now, by saying you reneged on the agreement. But instead, the greedy central bankers around the world let it happen, and here we are 40 years later with unprecedented amounts of debt, unprecedented amounts of inflation, social unrest, and it is a Ponzi scheme. It only gets worse. When they say QE to infinity, it's exactly what it means. It means it cannot stop. They must keep printing and printing until the game ends. And nowadays they have very sophisticated weapons of financial destruction, these derivatives, these HFT algorithms, high frequency, that manipulate markets. But in the end game, you're seeing crashing currencies, you're seeing social unrest, you're seeing inflation, and we're standing at the precipice where the money printing no longer even masks the problems. For a while, it seemed you print money and you can buy a little more time. Now, all the printing money does is cause currency wars and inflation. So something is going to give sometime soon. It's no coincidence that all of a sudden you're seeing all these secession movements around the world. You had Scotland almost voted to secede from the UK a month ago. Just last week, Catalonia, most people aren't even aware of it, but it's 25% of the tax revenues of Spain. It's the wealthiest region in Spain, and they decidedly voted that they want to secede from Spain, which is already a dying economy, a dying country. And you have Venice, Italy, by the way, is going to be next on the docket. They want to secede from Italy. So again, people are fed up by the inflation, and it's coming to a head. And again, you can even go back to the Arab Spring, which only this inflation only was seen there first because those are the nations that spend the greatest amount of their income on food. And believe me, things are not better. In fact, the Egyptian pound, the currency of Egypt, is far weaker now than it was even back then. So again, the inflation that all this money printing has caused, particularly since the system broke in 2008 and they went hog wild with the taking interest rates to zero and printing all the money, it's coming to a head right now. And the Swiss referendum may well be what pushes everything over the edge, because I assure you, and I assure the listeners around the world, if this is a vote of yes, you are going to see a massive amount of revolt against central banks around the world, starting with some of the countries that I just mentioned just now.
Well, actually, just 3 hours ago, published just 3 hours ago in The Guardian, fears that the dangerous Switzerland referendum could spark gold rush. Wow. I'm looking at this, and I'm reading this article, and thinking, you're absolutely correct, obviously. I wouldn't even be able to stand in your shadow when it comes to the financial things. However, you're looking at 5 million Swiss voters deciding on whether to force the central bank to essentially triple its gold reserves. Now, just let me ask you this. Is it possible, given the poll numbers, which I see are a little bit, they're striving to the poll numbers don't look very, very good in terms of this initiative. But what do you think?
We'll put it this way: two separate questions. As for the poll numbers, first of all, in these kind of votes, the polls are essentially meaningless, especially this particular one, because never before has a central bank, or I should say, never before has a government entity in Switzerland fought so hard with propaganda. I mean, remember, the government is not allowed to oppose a referendum publicly, and yet they just are saying, screw everyone, we're going to do it anyway, because they're so scared of losing their power. And the evidence is so terrible against them. I wrote an article the other day that says he doth protest too much, about Thomas Jordan, the Swiss National Bank head. I mean, he is out every single day telling people it'll be disastrous, catastrophic. Meanwhile, Switzerland was doing great until they got rid of their gold standard and started printing Swiss francs. Their balance sheet has ballooned faster and bigger than any other country on the planet, believe it or not, since that has happened. So As for those poll numbers, I don't believe them for a second, although just a week ago the yeses were ahead. And now, supposedly, the no's are ahead, except there's a huge margin of error, and 15% of the people are still undecided. And by the way, if you look at these kind of referendums, people won't even believe this. This Catalonia secession referendum, just 3 weeks before it occurred, meaning in the middle of October, I quoted the mainstream articles that say it's about half of the people want to secede. And it turned out to be 81% voted yes and 4% voted no. And again, so you're going to see a lot of propaganda out there trying to make people think it's not going to happen. It's comical because the Swiss people are the most financially savvy in the world, and they are very well aware of what's going on. So let's just wait until Sunday night and see what happens. And as for the gold rush, look, it's funny because people have you believe in the mainstream that gold is down, the price of gold is down because no one wants gold. The fact is 2013 was not only the world record demand year for the world for gold, but silver also. And 2014, gold demand is at the pace of last year, and silver demand is blowing away the pace of last year. And basically, look, I've been in this business. I am probably one of the handful of people who are the biggest experts in the world in gold and silver manipulation. I've been writing about it for a decade. I've been following GATA, and now GATA probably follows me. I've been doing this so diligently, okay? There's so much evidence out there. In the last 3 years, basically since, look, they printed all that money in 2008. They thought they were going to save themselves. 3 years later, everything was falling apart. The U.S. got downgraded. Europe was on the verge of collapse. And they basically said, we're going to do everything in our power to push the price down. And the fact is it's been all done with paper and derivatives. There's no physical left. We've had record demand. And, that demand is not going anywhere. Now, if the Swiss vote yes, okay, not only is Switzerland going to be obligated to buy $80 billion worth of gold, and by the way, that's at today's suppressed price is way below the cost of production. The second that yes vote comes around, the price is going to go way up. So I don't even think there's going to be gold out there available for them. But the whole world is going to join that trade, worried about central banks losing credibility and the vote yes. And by the way, if that happens, you're also going to see the Swiss franc potentially become the world's reserve currency. It's going to be more powerful currency than the dollar. That's how much is at stake right here. Although eventually down the line it's going to be China that rules the world. But there's a lot at stake here, and people don't even realize how much propaganda effort is being put into keeping this vote a no. Even if it is a no, it's going to be close, and there's going to be a lot of publicity to this event. But if it's a yes, the central bankers, it's like taking a bullet to the head.
So the central bankers, knowing them and what they have done in the past and what they plan to do in the future, they're not going to let this happen if they have any say in it.
Well, I mean, again, I wrote an article just last week called Unprecedented Skepticism, okay? And look, in my camp, I've been fully invested in precious metals for almost 13 years, and I write about them, and I've been writing about them for almost as long, and all day long, I see the sentiment. It's that bad. In fact, the buying despite this record demand in the world this year, it's not in the West. It's all in the East. People here are so demoralized by what's been going on with the suppression in the last 2 or 3 years alone, which has been much worse than anything we've ever seen, that they are at the point where everyone is capitulated mentally. There's no way that the bankers will ever lose. The stock market will go up forever. The gold price will stay down forever. Now everyone's going, they're going to rig this election. There's no way they'd let it be a yes. And even if it's a yes, they'll still find a way to pretend that they have the gold. I mean, everyone doesn't understand that economic mother nature cannot be denied. All the debt that's been built up, all the inflation that's been built up, all the physical demand you see out there right now when there's so little supply out there right now, and that's why you're having negative forward rates right now and shortages. The U.S. Mint had to shut down for 2 weeks because they ran out of silver a few weeks ago. So again, everyone is just so fearful of these people that they don't realize that there's a reality that they're facing They are losing. I mean, look at global interest rates right now. We have the Fed and Wall Street saying, well, the Fed's going to raise rates sometime next year, because the economy is so good. Meanwhile, the rates are falling to record lows because everyone knows that the economy will never get good and that the massive amount of debt in this country can never be serviced at rates anywhere above zero. Rates have nowhere to go but down until eventually hyperinflation comes. So, again, it doesn't even matter if this vote is a yes or no. If it's a yes, the world will change on Monday. Eat well on Thanksgiving because you're going to wake up to a new financial world if they vote yes. If they vote no, the same slow-motion train wreck is going to keep going until some kind of black swan eventually gets it. But if it's a yes, everyone better be ready to protect themselves financially and to do it quickly.
Interesting point. And now, we're investigators by profession. Joe and I, my son and I, have been an investigator in the private sector for 30 years for Fortune 100, Fortune 500 clients investigating fraud. And this fraud is what we see with respect to the manipulation of metals prices and whatever. One thing I always ask anyone who appears that has any knowledge of the metals manipulation and how we got to where we are right now. I'm going to phrase this question carefully because ordinarily, just barroom talk, I'd like to say, who do we shoot? Okay, but to rephrase that question, who is to blame? Who are pulling the strings? Who's manipulating? First of all, the precious metals. I mean, is it one or two or three entities or individuals, or is it much more than that? Is it a grand conspiracy? Or, I mean, who can I look to and say, you're responsible for this great robbery?
Well, here's how I'm going to put it. Because, again, when you're in my world, and, again, I'm a financial analyst by trade. I'm a CFA. I spent many years as an analyst. And if you read what I write, you'll see that I never speculate. I only base it on fact. And so in my world, even though, I've done so much work on gold manipulation and essentially proved it in many ways. I proved plenty of things in the manipulation, but it becomes so taboo, this subject, that anytime you say, well, there's gold manipulation, everyone's, the mainstream will go, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. The fact is, just last week, UBS, the giant Swiss bank, was admitted to manipulating the gold markets. Deutsche Bank just resigned its seat on the London FIX, funny that they call it the FIX, for manipulating the gold price. We have admissions throughout government of manipulating the gold price for years, decades. Alan Greenspan admitted it. It's everywhere. And the same goes for all kinds of markets. It's funny. People don't even blink an eye about saying, they don't think bonds are manipulated. What do you think QE is? What do you think zero interest rate policy is? What do you think the Fed does every day? They overtly manipulate interest rates. The president's working group on capital markets, their job is to manipulate the stock market. The Exchange Stabilization Fund, these are real entities. Their job is to, quote, manipulate foreign exchange and, they say manage foreign exchange and precious metals. So it's real stuff out there. But if you say who is doing it, again, in my world, I get a lot of people who want to believe conspiracies. It's just easy. In fact, some of the most popular newsletter writers out there are the ones who focus on these things. The Rothschilds are responding. It's J.P. Morgan and all these people in Jekyll Island and all this. No. Look, it's you use Occam's razor. It's that simple. Okay. First of all, there's no global conspiracy to rig financial markets because if you would need the people who have all the money to do it, the Chinese. They don't even speak Chinese, these people. How can they manipulate markets when the main people who have all the money don't even speak to them and hate them? No, basically you have fiefdoms. All the major Western economies that have been ruling the world for the last several decades, they're all in on it. They all have the same interest, which is paper money. They were the main parties to the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was reneged by Nixon. They all could have said, no, we want to have a real money system, but it was just in their best interest because they had this free credit card when they went off the gold standard to run up debt and have power. And so, the big Europeans in London and Paris and Brussels, it's in their best interest to keep the euro game going. And here in the States, it's in the best interest of the banks and the politicians to keep the dollar game going. And, and in Japan with the yen. But it's not like, yes, they do meet to try to manipulate markets here and there, but it's not a grand conspiracy. It's just they wake up every day playing defense. Some of that defense involves calling each other up and saying, hey, "What do we do today? I mean, look, I'm going to lower interest rates. I just want you to know, so have your people ready with their markets." But no, there's no grand scheme to take over the world. It's just they're just all out for themselves, and the problem is that the game they're playing, the Ponzi scheme they're playing, has to end. It's ended every time in the past, and this time, who can look around the world and not see that everything is going wrong, except the Dow Jones Industrial Average goes up every single day with the same algorithmic pattern. I mean, they're losing their game in every way, shape, and form. It's only a matter of when they lose control. And this time around, unlike in 2008, they have no cushion. They've already run their balance sheets up to infinity. They've taken interest rates down to zero. Heck, in Europe, they've taken them to negative. There's no cushion left. All they have left is the smoke and mirrors of keeping the stock market up.
Interesting. Occam's razor, indeed. I mean, that. So what you're saying is where we're at today, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just based on what you said, where we're at today is really a artifact or a result of good intentions gone awry, I suppose, maybe, or maybe not good intentions.
No, it's not even a matter of intentions. The fact was, look, you go back to, we were in charge in the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was made right after World War II. The whole world had destroyed itself, so the world ceded America, which at the time, seemed to be this, not only powerful but honest, ceded us the reserve currency. And for a time we managed it, the way the good old America with the founding fathers did. But then we realized we could abuse it. And it started really with Lyndon Johnson. He was like, I want to fight my war in Vietnam, and I want my great society. And heck, we'll just print more money. And eventually it got to the point where we realized that we have to, if we wanted to keep doing whatever we want, we have to renege on the gold standard. And again, the Western politicians, they could have fought back, but they just said, let's just let it happen anyway. And, as time went on, the Ponzi scheme got worse and worse and worse. It got bigger and bigger. Now it's at the point, you're at the end of the Ponzi scheme because printing money no longer works. Look at Japan. They just announced the greatest money printing scheme of all time, Abenomics, and here we are less than 2 years later, and they just had to double up on it because the economy is collapsing, the currency is collapsing, everything is collapsing over there. And so, when the United States does its QE, look at the economy. We have all-time record entitlements. We have all-time record real unemployment. Real median wages and income have been going down for decades now. Nothing works. If the Fed announced tomorrow, we're going to print even more money, the only thing that would go up is the stock market. People don't even pay attention anymore. They know that the fact that the stock market is up because the PPT and the money printing and the stock buybacks with the free money that the Fed prints up is not changing the economy. The economy is getting worse. So again, it's really only a matter of time. Will it be a slow motion train wreck that finally dies in a few years or 2 years? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that long. I think it's going to be very quick, and I think that there's a lot of catalysts out there that can break this down, whether they are geopolitical ones. Heck, Ukraine could do it itself and several others, or simple votes like in Switzerland. But something is going to do it,
okay.
And it may well be that they simply run out of physical gold and silver to supply.
It could be as simple as, well, it could be just that. Well, if we can take this to its next logical question, I suspect, what would it look like? We wake up to a different world. What would that world look like?
Well, again, this is another area where I try to trod carefully because there are people out there who are Armageddonists, either because they enjoy it or because it makes them, feel more comfortable. So there are some people who say, yes, it's going to be the worst case scenario. It'll be lawlessness and anarchy, etc. And let's face it. I mean, it's very possible. We're talking about what's going on in Ferguson. I mean, it's not a surprise that you're seeing an outbreak of social unrest around the world. If you have if you have a rapid decline in currencies, which by the way we're seeing around the world right now, we just haven't seen it as much here as the rest of the world because we have reserve currency. You could very well see some very, very scary times, especially in the big cities. It is possible that it happens in a more orderly basis, but there's no doubt in my mind that all of the major currencies, particularly the reserve-type currencies that have been propped up the most, like the dollar and the euro, are going to see dramatic declines in the standard of living of people, which could cause some major social unrest. But I don't like to be alarmist in that fashion because I don't want people to think that I'm preaching fear. I am simply preaching the mathematical certainty that the decline in purchasing power of major currencies, particularly the dollar, will happen, and it will continue to happen. It's been happening, but it's going to happen much more rapidly. If you think that your cost of living has gone up, I mean, I think about my health insurance. God, when I moved to Colorado 7 years ago, I paid something like $400 a month, and now I'm paying $800 a month. If you think that's bad, think what happens if the dollar really loses purchasing power, and you may not even be able to get health insurance with the money you have. So I just tell people, look, prepare for the worst, meaning have your junk silver, have your precious metals, have food, guns, be ready, know who you can trust, etc. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen that way, but certainly prepare for it because it very well could, even for a short period of time.
All right, Mr. Hoffman, a quick question here. Say the dollar does lose the world reserve currency status. What happens to prices here domestically overall?
Well, it will lose the reserve currency status, just as every other reserve currency status holder in the past, from the pound to the Portuguese currency, French, you name it, down the line. But what will happen will be major inflation, and it will certainly be the end of Walmart's dominance and power. You won't be able to go to Walmart and get cheap Chinese goods. There will probably even be shortages. I mean, look, the rest of the world lives at much lower standard of living than we do. We're so accustomed to it that we think that it's normal that you can get anything you want cheaply. The rest of the world can't. Heck, in Europe, they're paying $10 a gallon for gas. Can you imagine if we had to pay $10 a gallon for gas here? And again, remember, oil prices have just plunged around the world. They're paying $10 a gallon of gas with oil prices plunging. Can you imagine what that would do for the economy here? I mean, heck, if interest rates go up 1% here, it causes a catastrophe. And it'd be the same thing if oil prices went up a couple of bucks at the gas pump. So, yes, these are guaranteed to happen over time. The cost of living, specifically in what I call need versus want items, like energy and food, electricity, insurance, the things that you need to live on, will go up. There's no doubt. It's just a matter of how fast it will go up. And again, I can't emphasize enough, Americans are so secular. They don't realize that there's a whole other world out there where they're seeing this right now. People have heard the term Fragile Five. That's the five currencies, the Turkish lira, the Indonesian rupiah, Indian rupee, the Brazilian real, and I forget what the fifth one is, South African rand. They've lost 40% of their value versus the dollar in the last 3 years. And the reason they've lost it is because all of the money printing that the Fed has done has been exporting inflation around the world. These countries are trying to devalue their currencies so that they can compete in the business world, but they don't have the reserve currencies, and it causes much greater inflation. So again, you're seeing it around the world right now, starting with the Arab Spring and going around the world. Look at Brazil right now, what they're dealing with inflation, and you're going to see it eventually here. We're the king, but the king will be the last to die, and he will die. It'll be the most painful for the citizens that have had their standard of living elevated so far above where it should be.
All right. Very interesting. Wow. Man. Andy, you just lay it right out, don't you, buddy? But by the way, let me just interject one thing. I did have the opportunity to watch, and folks, if you have the opportunity to watch Mr. Hoffman with Elijah Johnson of Finance and Liberty, I think you were on with Chris Duane as well. This is back a week or so, maybe ago. I don't know.
Very
part
good. 3 was released today. 3-part interview.
Okay. Great. Go to milesfranklin.com and under Andy Hoffman's byline, certainly you can watch that. Fantastic interview. Go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to overtalk you there.
No, I was just going to get into the BRICS nations and what you see, how these BRICS nations and what their monetary policy is. If we see this slow drivel away from the dollar as the world currency, is this a possible alternative to that, adopting a BRICS-style world reserve status?
Well, again, there's a lot of stuff out there that people like to say on paper it sounds good. The BRICS, they're taking over the world, et cetera, these emerging market nations. But the fact is, again, the Occam's razor and, again, the everyman for himself. Look at the BRICS nations themselves. For the most part, they are in horrible shape. B is for Brazil. I mean, Brazil, the currency is at an all-time low right now. They're about to run out of water in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is the biggest. There's 20 million people there. They have huge inflation. They just had this election, which the stock market crashed, and one of the candidates mysteriously died beforehand. I mean, you're talking about major social unrest and issues. But people like and Petrobras, the oil. The number one business in the country, Petrobras, the oil business, it's massively under investigation for corruption. The stock is plummeting. This is not a nation that's on the verge of taking over any world leadership. R is for Russia. The Russian ruble is literally in free fall right now. And, I mean, Vladimir Putin, to me, is the most dangerous person in the world to the West. He's a brilliant negotiator and manipulator. And very powerful and has a lot of gold, et cetera. But, Russia is not doing very well. And with the oil price plunging, it's going to make it very difficult for them, no matter who they're allied with, to be a great power in the world anytime soon. And as far as I'm concerned, India is the worst managed country in the entire world. This is a nation of people who love gold and silver more than any. Record gold imports last year and this year and silver, and yet this ridiculous central bank has printed them into oblivion. They have major inflation, and I don't see anytime soon anything positive coming from there. And then, of course, you have China, which still pegs its currency to the dollar and has taken itself down, and it because of that, it fostered the biggest bubble. Forget anything you see over here. The biggest bubble in history in real estate and construction is collapsing right now. And then finally South Africa, which shouldn't even be on that list. It's such a pathetic country. It's all its gold has pretty much been exhausted. It's got major social unrest. The currency's collapsed. So again, yes, these countries, theoretically, they have a lot of people and they have cheap labor. They theoretically should be the winners going forward. But of that list, frankly, I think China's the only one that really is holding any cards right now. I think everyone's going to experience major pain right now for many years to come. And when the smoke clears, it's going to be the nations that have the resources and the gold, certainly China and probably Russia eventually, but there's going to be nothing anytime soon, and there's not going to be a gold standard that's based on BRICS or a certain group in the world. It's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of people, and eventually something will sort itself out in time, and I'm not even going to speculate what that'll be. Other than that, China will be prominent. Because it has the manufacturing market share, it has the capital, and it has the gold.
No, it has the gold. In fact, it's got more. China has more gold than what they're admitting to. Is that Let me ask you. Of course,
they probably have 10 times what they admit to. And they last told us, I think it was 5 years ago. They said that they went from 600 tons to 1,054 tons, just some random number. I think back in 2009, they just wanted to show the world that they were buyers. But now, you do simple math. Again, I'm an analyst. You do simple math about where the gold exports have been going around the world, and it's clear that they have massive amounts. I would believe personally that if they made an announcment today that was real, it would probably be in the 10,000 tons realm instead of 1,000. Just like if they actually ever did an audit of the Treasury, the U.S. Fort Knox. The mints in West Point and Denver, I think we have zero. I mean, I think we have absolutely zero gold left. I think we've leased, swapped, sold it out. That's why the Germans couldn't get their gold. That's why we haven't had an audit in 60 years. It's a smoke and mirrors Ponzi scheme. that's on fumes right now, and that's why everyone is asking for their gold back. Germany asked for their gold. Nope, can't have it, can't even see it. France, now they're saying we want our gold. Holland, they want their gold. Everyone wants their gold, and they're going to find that it doesn't exist. It's all sitting in the vaults of the Chinese and on the around the necks and the wrists and the fingers of the Indians.
Interesting, and that's been pretty much a common theme, by the way, of the guests that we've had on that talked about this. We've got probably about 24 emails from people all across the United States, in fact, all across the world, asking various questions. Folks are not going to be able to get to all the questions, but we're going to do our best to get to many of them.
And you can always email me at ahofman@milesfranco.com. I will answer all your questions. That's my job.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And I've got to say, you're a prolific writer, certainly a very great speaker, and you've got just so much to say with your broadcasts and the interviews. Very engaging, by the way. Okay, so America's empty. We have no gold. I mean, that's your position, and I echo that too. I believe. I mean, just based on everything I've been able to research, no gold whatsoever. Ponzi scheme, absolutely. We're the king of the Ponzi scheme, I suppose, or we're a major player in this. Do you? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but one of the questions here seems to be a common theme among the people that are emailing us. What's your gut telling you as far as a timeline is concerned before everything goes down? I'll toss this part in. Would that timeline be contingent upon what happens with the Swiss referendum?
Well, contingent in that if it's a yes, it's going to be like putting an accelerant on a fire. I mean, look, it's happening. It's a mathematical certainty. As I said, every fiat currency in history has collapsed, and now we're at the final stages where you're literally seeing the debt explode, the currencies collapse, the final currency war, as I call it, is in full bloom. Every single day, someone else is printing money, trying to collapse their currency, et cetera, for competitive reasons, which of course is a farce. It doesn't help. So again, we're at the end of the game already. I mean, you look at what's going on in financial markets around the world, aside from the rigged Dow Jones propaganda index. And you see the inflation and the unrest and the fact that all this money printing doesn't work. So, I mean, we're there. It will implode upon itself in a relatively short amount of time without a catalyst. And I don't mean short amount. I don't mean a month. I mean, it could be. Frankly, you could wake up tomorrow and any of a number of things. I see this headline about all this stuff going on overnight about Ferguson and the riots. It could be something as simple as that sets off a chain reaction that's ready to go. That's ready to chain react. But if not, it's not going to take 5 years. I love people when they say, "Oh, well, it's going to happen, but it won't be for a while." And I'm going, "Well, yeah, but that's because you're not doing the math of realizing that it can't happen for much longer. This is all that's left now. As I call it, is money printing, market manipulation, and propaganda." The propaganda leg of this, as I call it, evil tripod, doesn't work anymore. No one believes that there's a good economy. Heck, most of the economic data in this country is horrible. That's why when they put out yesterday or today, the GDP rose 4%. The whole world is in negative GDP, and those numbers are so ridiculously transparent. No one believes it anymore. Everyone's unemployed. No one could afford anything. How could anyone believe that we're doing well when the whole world is falling apart? So again, the propaganda doesn't work. The money printing doesn't work anymore. All that's left is just keeping up a couple of big stock markets, which frankly no one is participating in anymore. Retail participation is out. People lost their money between 2000 in the stocks and 2007, the real estate around the world. There's no one left that's watching going, "Oh, the Dow is up. That must mean that we're recovering." It's all just a matter of the powers that be desperately trying to kick the can a little longer. And again, it's going to come down a lot quicker than people think. But if you have catalysts, forget geopolitical catalysts. I'm talking about if the Swiss vote yes, the whole world is immediately going to realize that this was a massive, massive vote of no confidence against the powers that be. It's kind of like this Shinzo Abe in Japan. He's insane. He calls an election last week for next month in Japan. But does he really think the people are going to vote for him? I mean, since he's come in, and again, this is his second time in office. He came in about 8 or 9 years ago under the same platform of money printing and failed. This time he came around and did it even more, and the country is falling apart even more. It's kind of like they're going to vote him out, and everyone's going to realize that the emperor has no clothes. They have nothing left to do. And the same thing goes with this Swiss referendum. Everyone will know it. That's why everyone's front-running. That's why France is making their announcements, why Holland made its announcements beforehand, because they're all preparing. Why Alan Greenspan is giving a tour of America saying that QE is going to fail and you should buy gold. Alan Greenspan, the number one money printer of all time. Believe me, people are getting ready for what's coming.
When I saw that, I thought I misread the headline when I saw the headline, and then when I got into the actual statements that he made, I was thinking, man, is this guy dying? I mean, is this a deathbed confession of his sins, or what the, you know?
Well, for the record, for people who don't understand the background of Greenspan, I mean, look, you have, let's call it the big three here in the modern money printing era, are Greenspan, then Bernanke, and Janet Yellen. Now, Janet Yellen is a career government person. All she does is do what she's told. I'm in office. I'm told to print money. I print money. That's all she's ever done is work in government. Bernanke, before her, is a career academician. He has never worked a job in his life, and everything he has ever said, everything he's ever written about, has been completely and utterly wrong. And I don't think either him or Janet Yellen have the slightest clue that what they are doing and have done are disastrous. They really don't understand. They're that dumb, these people. But Greenspan, he's the most dangerous of all because he's brilliant. Look, his mentor was Ayn Rand. Atlas Shrugged. Literally, there's pictures of them. They were best friends. He wrote an article in 1966, as Alan Greenspan, called Golden Economic Freedom. It's on the internet. You can read it, where he basically said that paper money is evil and only gold can save you from the inflation of central banks. He knows. But he sold his soul when he was given the power of being the Fed chairman and being the maestro and the most powerful man on earth. So for 20 years or 15 years, he literally knew he was lying because he loved the job so much. He even might have for a second believed that he was doing something that worked because, you know, he'd see, oh, I'll print money, and then the market went up. But he always knew that he was doing the wrong thing. And now that it's all coming apart, he's just trying to whitewash his legacy. He spent the last 2 years, this feeble old man, throwing out more and more comments about how he believes you need to own gold and that the money printing doesn't work. Again, he's not going to whitewash his legacy, that's for sure. But fortunately for him, he'll be out of office long enough that Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke will get far more attention than he ever did, even though he was the guy who started it all. And actually, he wasn't the guy that started it all. It was Nixon and the whole team getting off the gold standard in 1971, which forced him to do what he did back then. The problem is, as a Ponzi scheme, it gets worse and worse. So it's just a matter of what Bernanke inherited from him was much worse, and what Janet Yellen inherited from Bernanke was that much worse.
Right, I get that. And for the listeners, and I've said this before, August 15th, 1971, when Nixon made the announcement going off the gold standard, pretty much putting to bed Bretton Woods, the biggest complaint about that whole announcement was that Bonanza, the television show Bonanza, was being preempted for this announcement. People had no clue of the seriousness, or at least the majority of the population had no clue of exactly what was taking place. I don't know. To me, I find that a little bit humorous. Well, sadly humorous, I suppose.
Well, I mean, look at what culture has gotten down to now. We're so dumbed down. Remember, more than half of the nation is on entitlements right now, which are printed out of thin air by a bankrupt government. So it's gotten to the point where bread and circuses, you think about 1971, those were the good old days. I mean, there was still, people still had a work ethic and there was some culture. But, it's collapsed. It's a world now of Twitter and gossip and video games and texting right now. There's so few people that are working that the motivation to work, the motivation to learn, to be intellectual has been dying in this nation. It's so sad around the world. And, I can imagine now what would happen if the president wanted to speak about something and he was, going over Dancing with the Stars. it's part and parcel of the decline of an empire. I'm not saying the U.S. is going away. I'm saying the U.S. as a leader of the world is going away. It's just going to be an average country, which sadly has the worst finances in the history of the world and is going to have a dramatically painful decline financially and socially as a result of the dollar losing its reserve currency status.
What can we do? Andy, what should we be doing to the listeners of this program, obviously to those in the United States and Canada, in Western countries? What should we be doing to protect ourselves?
Well, again, my area of focus is the financial world. And yes, of course you should prepare for yourself for the worst case scenario, the food, the guns, and all that stuff. But again, I'm not saying it necessarily will be that way. My job, it's not just my job, it's my passion. It's to protect people's assets. I'm a financial person. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just telling you what I've done, which is I've gotten out of paper currencies. I got out of the stock market and all paper markets years ago because they're all rigged. That's why I left Wall Street, and that's why I own physical gold and silver. It's my savings. It's not investment like the propaganda will tell you. It's your savings. It's the way you used to think of money you put in the bank. That used to not be inflated away by money printing, which gave you an actual interest rate. Heck, in Germany now they have negative interest rates. The bank couldn't be frozen like what happened in 2008 and need to be bailed out or bailed in, as we're seeing right now. So I would say stop thinking in terms of money being this fiat currency that's just printed ad nauseum and is destroying its value. Think about owning real money and owning it outside of the system, meaning don't put it in a safety deposit box. Put it in our Brinks program and Brinks Security Vault in Montreal, or just put it in your backyard, or I shouldn't say backyard. Get a safe and a dog and an alarm and hide it and only tell people that you need to know. And everyone should own junk silver. Google my article, Must Own Junk Silver. Junk silver is pre-1965 or pre-1964 silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars that were 90% silver content, because they are the best barterable item on the planet as far as I'm concerned, because it's actual coinage, could never be confiscated or anything like that. And, and just think in terms of, your money is not safe in the financial system. I don't keep money in banks. And I certainly don't keep it in rigged financial markets, especially ones that are at all-time high valuations. I mean, you'd realize the stock market now is trading at higher valuation than 2000. That's how bad things have gotten with all the money printing and market rigging. So I would say from a financial standpoint, stay away from the rigged financial paper system and start thinking in terms of owning real assets, to protect yourself with. My only assets are gold and silver in my house. A little cash that I need to have, but think in terms of money being different than what you used to think of it as.
Okay, and that's what a lot of people are asking. I'm kind of going through as you're talking in these emails. Eileen Eileen from Nebraska is asking. She's got some money in the bank. She said, "What if I have $50,000 in cash in the bank? My house is paid for. Should I turn? Would it be wise to turn that $50,000 in cash into gold and silver instead of keeping it in the bank?" Or she goes on, but that's the gist of her question.
Right. Well, I mean, as I said, I keep no money in banks. I mean, I take that back. I do have some cash, partly because my wife wants me to have some, and partly because you do have to pay for some things. And that cash, I don't keep it in a bank. I keep it in a brokerage account, a non-marginal brokerage account at Charles Schwab, because Charles Schwab, in the worst-case scenario, is not a bank in the banking system. It doesn't have a banking balance sheet with leverage. So I think if I have to keep it somewhere, that's where I keep it. But I only keep a small amount in paper dollars because they're being inflated away and they pay no interest. And I also fear that there could be, I don't like having anything or very little in this system which can be frozen up and taken away by the government at a whim. Now, I can't speak for Eileen's finances. I don't know all the other things she has, and I'm not a financial advisor telling you what to do with your money. I'm saying what I have done with my money is 90% of it is in physical gold and silver, because I feel that that's savings. Yes.
Yeah, and that's smart. Ronnie wants to know. No, he's from Portland, Maine. Ronnie, thanks for writing in. Fascinating conversation, fascinating guest. that's to you, of course. But he wants to know after things. Okay, boy, it's a little cumbersome question here, but let me see if I can boil it down to this. When everything is crashed or when things are down and out, the dollar is done. What do you do with gold and silver, for example? I mean, are we going to be trading in gold and silver?
Well, again, you're talking about the difference between the worst case scenario and some other scenario. And look, ultimately, it's doubtful there'll ever be gold trade. Gold will be literally on the street as money. It will, I think, potentially in these worst case scenarios, which may only last a short amount of time. Eventually, there will be some kind of money backed by something. No one will trust any other kind of money. Heck, they may not even trust money backed by something because no one will trust the governments will back it the way they say they do. So, you're in a situation where there's going to be a lot of mistrust of the world, and that's why you need to own the real thing. I mean, people don't realize that just right this minute, gold and silver are the most liquid currencies in the entire world. I mean, the dollar, like if you use the definition of money, yes, the dollar is fungible. All dollars are the same, although even now the $100 bills, there's 10 different kinds of them. And yes, you can make change. They are divisible. But, obviously the store of money, they've been horrible. The dollar has lost 98% of its value since the Federal Reserve came into being. And it's not a medium of exchange, except in the United States. Everyone likes to say, well, they accept dollars everywhere. No, they don't. Go to Canada and try to get a cab with $1. It's almost parity, and they still don't even know the exchange rate. And in fact, a lot of countries don't even want dollars anymore because they're being overinflated. But if you went to any country in the world this very minute where no one is using gold as money, theoretically, it's not the official currency, everyone will take it. I was in Africa 5 years ago, in deep, dark Cameroon, Africa, and people knew how much gold was worth. And believe me, when currencies really start to go down, everyone will know exactly how much it's worth. In fact, there's a lot of places in the world right now where you're seeing major inflation. I guarantee you, if you go to Argentina right now, if you go to the Middle East, some places, they will know exactly how much a coin is worth, and eventually everyone will know it is here. You may need to barter with it here, but you certainly, more and more people understand what it's worth over time. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. It's been going on for 5,000 years, and never before will it be more valuable than what we're going to be seeing in the coming years.
That's an amazing conversation. It really is. I'm going to slip in one last question and then let you have the floor for the remaining time we have together. The one question by Eric, thank you, Eric, for this question. And indeed, it makes you think, what would happen if Germany or any other country that we are holding their gold for example, demands, insists, says, hey, look, we want our damn gold back right now. Okay, we want it all back. Are we going to war?
And they will.
Is this? Yeah.
Oh, and they will.
Okay.
I mean, look, the only reason that they didn't push it further, look, they asked for 2 years ago and they got nothing, was they together, as the leaders of the ECB and with the Federal Reserve and our money printers and market manipulators, we were able for the last 2 years to keep markets up. So it's like, why? There was no need to rock the boat. They know they're in an untenable position. The gold is gone. But there's no need to do anything right now. Why not just kick the can as far as we can? But eventually, look, everyone knows that as soon as things go wrong, governments start to do draconian things. People don't even realize that in early 2009, the Congress was actively debating bills regarding the confiscation of IRAs. And it's only because the money printers got the markets back up that they stopped talking about it. But believe me, the second things go bad again, the Germans will want their gold back, and the government will talk about confiscating your IRAs, maybe through this MIRA program or who knows what. But again, trust me, when things go bad, everything will compound on each other right then. And believe me, the Germans will want their gold, the Italians will want their gold, everyone will want their gold.
And
it won't
be
there. Yeah.
And then what? The bombs start flying, or
who knows? Maybe.
Who knows, right?
Maybe.
Oh man, I have to tell you, folks, and we're getting so many questions. There's just no way we're virtually out of time. Mr. Hoffman, if you had the attention of the entire world, if you had the podium and you had the microphone, in 2 minutes, what would you say? I'm not even sure that's a fair question to ask of you.
Of course, it's a very fair question because, again, I am not pontificating for the world about everything. I'm not everything to everyone. I'm a good financial analyst who has become an expert in this field, and I work with and follow the smartest people in the world. And what I do for myself is to tell people, stop thinking that your fiat currency is money. You know it's destroying you by inflation right now, and you see what's going on around the world, and there's so many catalysts that could accelerate the pain quickly. Start protecting yourself. Heck, just buy a little bit of gold and silver. The second you own a coin in your hand, you hold a quarter in one hand and a silver dollar in the other hand. You think you have a feather in that first hand. It's worthless, the paper money that you have. Buy yourself a little gold and silver and start to think about what the world's going to look like once all this money printing destroys the currencies as they have throughout history. Give us a call at Miles Franklin, 800-822-8080, or email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
And definitely follow your blog entries as well as your interviews at milesfranklin.com. Mr. Hoffman, you've been just a tremendous guest. I want to thank you so much for your gracious gift of time, and I'm sure you're going to be getting a lot of emails from a lot of people whose questions remain unanswered. So that's ahoffman@milesfranklin.com. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and I look forward to doing your show again. It was a great time.
Oh, thank you, my brother. Thank you so very much for your time. Folks, that was Andrew Hoffman from milesfranklin.com. Interesting, fast-paced. My goodness, an hour went by so quickly. Very, very knowledgeable man, certainly. And folks, we apologize for not being able to get to all of your questions, but thank you for writing. Certainly, I will forward what I can to Mr. Hoffman, and if you would just redirect your questions to Mr. Hoffman, I'm sure he can help you there. Folks, you're listening to a very special edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report. It is the 25th day of November, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with Joe Hagmann, my son, fellow investigator, and just all-around good guy, especially today. Of course, I fed him. So.
Coming up next, Dave Hodges will be joining us from the Common Sense Show.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of the Hagmann Hagmann Report. It's the 25th day of November, 2014. This is a live broadcast. Pinch me, I'm live. And I want to say that we've got with us for this hour and the next hour a gentleman that we're very close to and that we think a lot of, Mr. Dave Hodges. He is the head of the Common Sense Show, the website, and, of course, the host of the Common Sense Show, the radio program. Now, the radio broadcast, I want to say this. In all seriousness, folks, you know, the Watchmen, and Steve Quayle was perhaps the first really to sound the alarm on this, and Hawk and Greg Evenson and others. But the Watchmen, we're all under attack, and we're all facing. Well, folks, if you can only, if you only knew some of the things that we're dealing with, if you only knew some of the things that Steve Quayle's dealing with, or Dave Hodges is dealing with, you'd understand the viciousness, the vile nature of the attacks that we're having to endure. Denial of service attacks in the practical end and the real side. As well as attempted marginalization and vilification and all sorts of things. It's just incredible. So it's with that kind of backdrop that we asked Dave Hodges to spend a couple of hours of his precious time, and his time is precious. This man is a busy man, busier than heck, I can tell you that. And he's a very prolific writer. Some of the most recent articles he's written have been so right on the money that he's actually, his fan club is, I should call it a fear club, because the targeting or the subject matter is so right on that he's got a lot of people on the run. And that's just the way, look, we need that with his specificity, with his knowledge, with his information. And this isn't false flattery. This is just plain and simple truth. And we just think the world of him. With that, Mr. Dave Hodges. Dave, welcome to the program tonight.
Well, thanks, Doug and Joe, and thanks for the gracious introduction. And Annie and I, my news director, Andy DeRiso, and I had made a decision a few weeks back. We're going to start doing more articles on spirituality, fulfilling one's destiny, and so forth. And we've done a little of that, but we can't seem to pull away from the onslaught that's coming against the American people. And I'm going to sound rather disjointed tonight, and I want to apologize ahead of time, but I'm going to be relaying news as it's coming to me. I haven't had full time here to disseminate, organize, and I know what it is I have to say in print by morning. I just haven't conceptualized the progressive outline that I have to follow because there's so many twists and turns. So I apologize if I sound disjointed tonight, but I think it's really important, and I'm going to say this without any fanfare or hyperbole. I feel if I don't get this information out, I may be blocked from doing so, because I feel there's the convergence, Doug, of information that implicates the President of the United States and Eric Holder for high crimes and misdemeanors, including treason, willful accomplices, at least after the fact, for murder. I hold them accountable for what's going to happen in Ferguson tonight and in future nights in all cities across this country where there has been training. And I'll just give it a banner headline here as best as I can make it up here on the spot. This administration has conspired with terrorists, not only agitation groups, that's been well documented, the new Black Panthers, and all these other groups that have come into Ferguson to whip up the country into a frenzy. And as Melissa Melton so accurately pointed out in her article, she talked about 83 cities where agitation training has taken place. We know about that. What people have not made the connections with entirely, but are beginning to make the connections, are with the terrorist connections that are happening now in Ferguson and all across the country, and how this administration is complicit. And I'm having a bit of self-recrimination this evening because I had some of this information back in May, June, July, and August, and I pursued the illegal immigration and the potential health risks from immigrants, including Ebola, and I went down that path rather than taking a right turn and going down the path where we're at today. I'm going to be very, very, very specific. In August, a photograph surfaced, and I have it up on my website on my latest article, and it was showing a CNN reporter interviewing a policeman, and in the background it says, "ISIS is here." Well, that raised some eyebrows and got a little bit of attention, but in the midst of the chaos, that faded away. Well, I've since procured from Twitter 2 tweets. This is from the same time frame. ISIS is here, signed behind at Jake Tapper, #Ferguson, and then another one from Abu Ottoman. The blacks in #Ferguson, and I'm reading directly from the tweet, there is an alternative to this indignity. Pick yourselves up with Islam, like #ISIS in Iraq. And then it's signed, and then the date stamp on this is the 19th of August, 2014 at 3:14 a.m. This should have been enough for any of us who came across this information that's publicly available to start asking very serious questions. But I think all of us, or the majority of us in the truthful media, the independent media, got mired in the agitation factor of the federal government and how the Department of Justice was agitating blacks to riot under false pretenses, and that's where we focused our efforts. And then, of course, I went off on the Ebola trail myself because of my connections. So let me share with the audience, Doug, if you don't mind, if you'll grant me a little leeway here, to go back to last summer to what I discovered, and I'll bring it full cycle. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, here's what I had last summer. I had a gentleman contact me from the DEA, and he's an active agent, and he was a fairly high-profile agent, and he's since dropped out of my radar. I think things got too hot for him because we had a very amicable relationship, and I did everything he asked me to do to protect his identity. And he pointed me in the following direction. The immigration that was taking place wasn't children. It was Hamas, Hezbollah terrorists, MS-13, and I've also had this confirmed by 2 Border Patrol agents who've consistently talked to me off the record. They've also talked to people here in Arizona like our prominent physician, Dr. Jane Orient, so this is nothing new. And these people, the Sinaloas, the MS-13 assassins that work for the Sinaloas, Hamas, Hezbollah, all partnering up to cross the border, and the Border Patrol was ordered by DHS to send MS-13 detainees in groups together. So if they caught two MS-13 people, they waited until they had 8, 10, or 12, and then they shipped them out together. They knew they were MS-13 because of the tattoos, and for every murder they have a teardrop tattooed on their face. So the Border Patrol knew exactly what they're dealing with, and they were told to treat these like children immigrants and just process them out. As I dug deeper into this is when I was contacted by the DEA agent when I published this. He said it goes deeper, Dave. He said these people are being trained paramilitarily outside San Salvador, and they're being trained by a group called the Sanchez Paredes, which is the largest drug cartel in the world. They don't make the radar, but they're the largest drug cartel in the world, and they operate out of Peru. And the Peruvian army is in full support of them. In fact, there's a huge overlap, and they get their arms and drugs from West Africa. And that's just how I got on the Ebola trail, because of the West African connection. And I had this information, I'm going to say late June, early July. And it took me about 3 weeks to process it before I wrote about it, because I wanted to be real sure, because I was dealing with an unnamed source from the DEA. And I was able to eventually gain enough collaborative information that I went ahead and published it. But let me tell you what I found out with the West African connection. Al-Qaeda is involved, Hamas is involved, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, the president's half-brother, Malik Obama, who's the head of their finance in arms procurement and shipment. And these people all are in cahoots with these Sanchez Paredes. I was also pointed to a court case that anybody can look up. In fact, I actually have documented in an article I wrote last summer. If you Google the Sinaloas and the deal with the DEA as testified to in Chicago District Court in 2010, the Sinaloas were promised 80% immunity for drug shipments and their personnel, and they agreed they would give up 20% for appearance's sake, so it looked like the DEA and Border Patrol were doing their jobs. The DEA agent pulled me into this because he said, you need to understand how corrupt this government is, how high up the corruption goes. This involved the Department of Justice. Even though they didn't make the headlines, it was only the DEA. He said it was the DOJ telling us what to do. And he had firsthand knowledge. Now, this is in the local Chicago papers, but interestingly, it didn't make Fox, it didn't make CNN, but you can go and you can read this, and as of August, they had not scrubbed this article yet. And you know they like to scrub articles when we stumble upon them. Well, that was just the beginning. I realized that we were in big, big trouble because drugs were coming into this country. High-level government officials were being held at bay and told that you will be complicit in this drug trafficking. And it was also part and parcel to the immigration issue, and the immigration issue served as a cover to allow massive amounts of terrorists into our country and to allow massive amounts of assassins, MS-13, the assassins for the Sinaloas, into this country, and they are trained by terrorists outside San Salvador. Now, that's one leg of this. Now, people are saying, Dave, I thought you were going to talk about Ferguson. Well, I am, and I warned you I'd be a little disjointed because there's a lot of parts of this to pull together. As I have spoken out publicly on this, I've become a lightning rod for tips. And I don't go off tips that are willy-nilly. I have to be able to, if I'm going to use an unnamed source, and I do just what I'm sure you do and Joe does, we validate the source, even if we guarantee the anonymity of the source, and then we look for collaborative data to support this. I have heard from two members of the St. Louis media today, a deputy sheriff, and another person, I can't specify where he works because it's too specific and he'd risk having his identity outed, but I've heard from 4 people today that have told me the following, that the St. Louis community, and this isn't anything new, but where it goes is new, there's a huge Palestinian, PLO, community in St. Louis, a huge Muslim community in St. Louis, and a huge West African community in St. Louis, and they are all complicit in trying to bring weapons, bring agitation, and they're working in cahoots with groups like the New Black Panthers, Al Sharpton, and the Department of Justice. And I'm going to name some names here, and I've had this named for me by 2 independent sources that don't even know each other. One of the central players and I'm going to do more research on this tonight, is a man named Khalid Abdul Muhammad, and he is connected to the Black Panthers. He's a Muslim activist. He has connections into Middle Eastern terrorist groups, and he is providing whatever they need. And this also goes to another group. It's called the Black Lawyers for Justice. Alton Maddox, who may now be deceased, but another man, and I only have his last name. His name is Shabazz, and he is connected to this group. They are connected to the other agitation groups that are in Ferguson trying to whip things up. I wrote an article today where I said, or this morning that got published, and I said, well, there had only been riots in Ferguson under two conditions. One, if there was an indictment delivered, and two, if there wasn't an indictment delivered. These people were lined up to agitate. They have provided with many members in the community things like flashbang grenades. They have, I've been told they've been passing out automatic weapons. And if you recall last night on the Fox News broadcast, in fact, I heard it with my own ears. I didn't hear the shots of 45s or 38s going into the air. I heard rapid-fire shots, automatic weapons being fired into the air. This is going to get extremely serious. The authorities there have a great deal of awareness. One of the deputy sheriffs told me, he says, I'm driving into work right now. He said, I'm on I-70 traveling into St. Louis, and I had to give you a call. And he's a guy that's been corresponding with me since the summer. And he said, I'm looking right now at convoys of what looks like military trucks, but I suspect they're National Guard. I don't know what they are. And behind them are massive amounts of prison buses. He said, as far as I can see, he said, this is about a mile-long convoy going into St. Louis. And I said, well, what do you make of all this? He goes, well, it's what we already know to be true. Last night at the scene, they arrested people who are PLO and they're Muslim. They're not local African Americans. They were on scene agitating and leading the violence. Now, you're not going to hear this. And there are people who know about this in the St. Louis law enforcement group, but they're too afraid to speak out. And the ones who have talked to me have told me that if I identify where they work, whatever their duty station is, eventually it'll be linked to them. I had a talk show host from St. Louis talk to me. We've had 3 conversations today, and I read to him what I've just related here, and he said he has this information plus more. What he said to me was that he was at a local gun store. He was walking by, and his relatives have business in the area, and he was going to check out the business, make sure everything's okay, get the important stuff out of the store in anticipation of tonight's rioting. Well, in this store, I thought they had moved all the guns and ammo out, but he says no. He said the Sons of Anarchy, in mass, massive amounts of motorcycles are in St. Louis, and they are purchasing ammunition. So I'm not sure how they factor into this, but if you look at the agitators are basically coming down on the side of being African American, even though a lot of them aren't. They're imitators. And then here you have reportedly a white contingent that's arming themselves, and you have to wonder, is this Charles Manson's fulfillment of Helter Skelter? So that's kind of an overview of what I've got, but it even goes deeper, and as we explore this, and I know I better take a breath so you can ask some questions and make some comments, but this even goes as high as the Department of Defense. And we'll explore all this, but let me just take a breath here and let you guys comment or ask me a question.
We've seen the deployment of Department of Justice, what they would call, people who help teach people how to protest properly, and the involvement of Eric Holder even furthering after the verdict, saying, their investigation is not over. We've seen the different agencies say, provocateurs are going, as you said, you stated that there were 3 different types of provocateurs down there agitating things. We see Chuck Hagel stepping back at this time. Also, the military, during the first Ferguson riots, released a civil riot and disturbance manual on how to handle these rioters and protesters. Also, now I saw a report today that there were Department of Justice and the Obama administration gave a stand-down order to the National Guard troops that were there yesterday. Have you heard anything to verify that?
Yes, absolutely. Lieutenant Governor Kinder, and I'm sorry, the name escapes me here, but Lieutenant Governor Kinder, Paul Joseph Watson reported this in a fine report that he published on InfoWars, and he named Kinder, and if you'll bear with me a second here, I may not have that available, guys, I'm sorry, but it was the mayor of Ferguson, and I don't recall his name off the top of my head.
Jay Nixon, I think?
No, that's the governor of Missouri, I believe, but let me scroll down here. Let's see here. I know this is live radio, right?
James Knowles?
That's it. Yes, it's Knowles. Thank
Mayor
you.
James Knowles. Okay.
Here it is. Here, it's James Knowles. And you're absolutely correct. They both have said that they believe that the DOJ was complicit in or issuing the stand-down order. One of the other things that's circulating out there right now, and this came to me through a second media source, not a talk show host, and he emailed me this morning. I called him back. We played phone tag until late this afternoon, and what he told me was that I'm trying to think of his exact words, he had information from inside the police department because they were looking for support from the National Guard. And this is why so many of the businesses were unguarded. This will explain why the McDonald's and that grocery store market and all these got burned. They were supposed to have been guarded by the National Guard. But by the time it started to happen, the police didn't feel they had enough manpower and presence to risk venturing out from each other. It's kind of like what Custer did at the Little Bighorn. Don't split your army up because they're easier to defeat. And so they stayed closer to home base because they expected the National Guard. This is from a police source to the media source who contacted me, and he said, if you use my name, they will fire me. They are controlling media outlet here. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we've already been told some do's and don'ts on what you can't report. And he said, it's not arbitrary, but he says, look, I can read between the lines if I go too far. But he says, I'm going to give you this because it deserves to be out. And he says it also parallels what not Nixon said, but what the Lieutenant Governor Kinder said, and also what the Mayor Knowles said. And so the police were left on their own last night, and the National Guard was held out. And this is extremely disturbing. And let's go back to Chuck Hagel for a second, because you brought that up, and I mentioned the DOD. Chuck Hagel came out, guys, I don't remember the time frame, guys, but 5 weeks ago maybe, and he had a real cryptic, mysterious, almost nonsensical comment about the New World Order. And it wasn't so much that even the New World Order comment was in context. I remember how weird that sounded, and I told some of my associates, I think that was a cryptic message. I said, because he's not a stupid man. He's not on drugs, and he didn't say something nonsensical. I said that was a coded message, in my opinion. And here we have 5 weeks later, he's out of a job. Well, I took this to, actually got called by one of my sources. I didn't take it to him, but I took the issue to him when he called me. I've got a very good military source, former high-ranking, and he told me that Hagel will not go along with any more persecution of American military. He told that Obama directly, he says, I've participated in too many firings. He says, if you want these people fired, you're going to have to get the Joint Chiefs to do it. He says, I'm no longer going to have these discussions because we're firing men of honor that are heroes that have defended this country. And that was the first nail in his coffin. And I understood that conversation took place about the same time he made the New World Order comment in public. Well, I've also come to find out, and let's go back in time. I'll back up and preface it by saying I wrote an article about a month after Ambassador Stevens was murdered, and the article strongly implicated the administration in being complicit in his murder. And I mentioned at the time Admiral Goyette, and by the way, this general who was talking to me today, same source for information, and he was right on the money with this. Admiral Goyette and General Hand, the head of AFRICOM at the time, had conspired to rescue Stevens, and they were going to use him as a mouthpiece to unseat this administration and send most of them to prison. And they were arrested by their embedded CIA #2 executive officers. and the plot was foiled. And a lot of people said that there'll never be another attempt at a coup against this administration because Obama went on a reign of terror. He started firing people for poker chips and all kinds of nonsensical things, and the body count of these generals fired just grew exponentially. And a lot of people said, well, anyone who wanted to rebel will have to do so now on the outside where they have far less influence. And I heard that the rebellion efforts were dead in the water and there would be no effective military coup. In fact, if you guys remember, I was actually writing about this pretty heavily 18 months to 2 years ago. I don't think a coup ends well, but it's preferable to the direction this administration is taking us. So I thought this was dead in the water. Well, I understand now that Hagel's refusal to fire any more military officers is directly tied to the fact that he doesn't want to disrupt the second generation that is no more loyal to Obama than the first generation he's fired, and that he thinks the breeding ground for setting this straight if things get wildly out of hand is in place, and he was prepared to sacrifice his position for that. And I was told that is the number one reason why he's out of office right now, is because he would not participate in any more purges. He was actually actively protecting some of these people. And so the long and short, when we step outside the matrix here of controlled information, I think the long and short of what we're looking at right now is there is more than likely, and my source wasn't exactly sure, but he used these words. He said, with a pretty good probability, he says, I can tell you there's discussions taking place right now about what to do with this out-of-control administration. And what's centering this is going back to Ferguson. We are actively putting Muslim terrorists on the ground to foment rioting that will result in the death of American citizens. So back to my original statement, guys, this president and Holder, they are responsible for being accomplices to murder if there's one person who dies.
Dave, it's interesting you bring it back to Ferguson because back in 2004, 2005, I think it was, it might have been 2006. I've got this on a hard drive that's away from any network, and I don't have it hooked in. There was an article in the St. Louis Dispatch, and I have the article, and I've got the Associated News story where the Muslims in St. Louis, in and around St. Louis, and that includes that Ferguson swath of Ferguson as well, because of the demographics, and you've got the blacks and or African Americans if you prefer, whatever, and you've got the immigrants from different Middle Eastern countries that were purposely settled there. Well, the St. Louis Dispatch, there was an incident that happened in the mid-2000s that involved a shooting, and I can see in my mind, I can see the photograph of this guy in a convenience store. It's Arabic-owned, Muslim-owned, and they were gearing up. They were buying weapons and ammunition, and the reporter went in and asked what they were doing essentially. And I'm kind of talking about disjointed. Well, that's me right now, but because I don't have all the facts right in front of me, but I recall this very specifically. What I do recall specifically was the fact that this Muslim said, the first opportunity we have, when the first opportunity presents itself, we are going to start a war within your own country. And it went on to say too about exploiting any type of situation that they could in fact exploit to create a civil war, if you will, and let it begin in St. Louis. Very heavily Islamic population and ties to mosques all around the country. I don't know how that fits in, if it does, with what you're saying.
It does.
This goes it goes back 10 years,
I received a text about 5 minutes ago from my news director, Andy DeRiso. As reported by Fox News, 22,000 troops sent into Ferguson. It started.
Really?
Yes.
Well, going back to what you said, though, didn't are we to believe that Obama perhaps and DOJ Holder put pressure on Nixon and company not to activate the troops or National Guard. That is.
That's National Guard. Well, I just sent Annie back a message. I said Army, and let's see, she's responding right now. It says just troops running on the bottom banner. So troops could be National Guard, could be Army. Maybe someone can let us know some specifics, but Fox News is not being more specific than that at the moment. But this makes sense because this is now another provocative move on the part of this administration. Rather than let the National Guard and local law enforcement, remember what I told you? When I was contacted by that deputy sheriff today, and I was also told by another person who's a talk show host that this convoy was indeed coming in on I-70. I've heard this twice now. And I'm trying to be, I hate to be so cryptic in my identifications, but I've gotten two sources on this convoy that came into St. Louis, and I'm sure this was seen by thousands of people. You cannot hide something like this. But I'm wondering if this wasn't part of this, but they're militarizing the area. And let me speak, from the field of psychology of which my professional background is in. They did low-level last night in many cities, low-level protests, scattered, disorganized, not violent, only a few people arrested at each scene. But let me explain to you something out of social learning theory that really could tell you where this could go. The people that would be drawn out last night in various cities, I'd say the majority of them are just looking for trouble. I think most people, I don't care whether they be black or white, are saying this is not worth tearing our cities apart for. Most people, I don't care what your color is, they're reasonable people. They just want to live their lives and be left alone by their government. But I think what we're seeing here are people who have been agitated and agitators who are carrying out these protests in other cities. And let me tell you, when you see someone, and this happened in the LA riots, something called social learning theory. If you watch someone break the law and they get caught, it's a deterrent to you doing it. But if you see someone being reinforced or rewarded for breaking the law, you're more likely to imitate it. And what we saw in the LA riots over and over and over, as people would run into stores and come out with valuables, and gee, the police are just watching, they're not even arresting us. Well, I'm going to go do it and see if I can get away with it. And pretty soon the whole group is doing it. And if these people tonight, tomorrow night, whatever night, are allowed to proceed with impunity and law enforcement stands down, much like the National Guard did last night, you're encouraging this behavior all across the country. And this will spread. Mark my words. This will definitely spread. In fact, one of the reasons that George H.W. Bush said he ordered in the Army and the Border Patrol on the third day was because I don't want people in other cities getting the idea that they can do this. I mean, this psychology was well known to the administration at the time. So this is one of my concerns. This is a big powder keg that's ready to blow up in everybody's face.
Wow. I mean, I don't even know how to respond to this except to say this has all of the fingerprints, looking back at this, as something that was extremely well organized and heavily orchestrated, doesn't it? I mean,
the person connected to law enforcement I spoke to today said that he had spoken to people that they knew this crap was going to happen 2 weeks ago. Yes,
2 weeks
so the short answer is yes. Absolutely, no question. But let's look at what we've got. We've got drug trafficking courtesy of the terrorist groups along with the Sinaloa cartel. You've got, and this is Muslim influence in this country, make no mistake about it. And then you've got the Muslim influence in Ferguson. If you go to Dearborn, Michigan, you can't get a job in the front counters in a public school unless you read, write, speak Arabic. I mean, we're looking at segments of our population that are being turned on our ear. We've had a judge in Oklahoma and a judge in Florida, and Annie has reported this in the news segment on our show, that have ruled under Sharia law They've embraced some Sharia law concepts in some of their rulings. I am not Islamophobic. I don't care what your religion is. Practice it all you want. You can build a mosque in my neighborhood, but the moment you pose a threat to my community and to my country and to my family, I'm going to start speaking out, and I may have to take defensive action. This does not implicate all people of Middle Eastern descent by any means, but the agitators in Ferguson, I think we as a country need to put them on notice that we will someday be able to rid ourselves of the criminals in Washington, in the Department of Justice, and in the White House, and we will arrest and prosecute all these people who are trying to basically turn our country into having a civil war. And this is where this is headed, guys. I mean, let's be honest. If Ferguson spreads, if it just spreads to a half dozen other cities, you're going to see the beginnings of massive martial law.
I totally agree with you on this. And Dave, let me just expand on this and even get a little bit more diverse in what we're talking about here, okay, because we had talked about this earlier, at least parts of it. Okay, so you had mentioned, for example, the drugs, and I know that this sounds disjointed. Well, folks, welcome to the club. We're dealing with a lot of information here. But the drugs that are so prevalent here in the United States, St. Louis, elsewhere, every major city. If you go back to Benghazi, just for a moment, if you go back to Arab Spring, what we've seen happen in particular with Benghazi, is Ansar al-Sharia and other organizations, and especially AQIM, the drug trade, exporting drugs, importing weapons here in the United States, exporting drugs, or vice versa. I mean, it's kind of like a four-lane highway across the northern part of Africa, down to West Africa, here over into South and Central America and up into the United States, with respect to weapons and trained agitators, trained terrorists, and then drugs going out, complements of the CIA, State Department, under diplomatic cover. That same route, if you will. So all of this, although we're looking at domestic disturbances here in Ferguson and St. Louis and other cities, we're seeing the exportation of drugs and importation of trained assets, Islamic terrorists, into these, and then them being inserted into places like Ferguson. And as crazy as that sounds, mixing with those people already here and here for decades, at least a decade or more, to exacerbate the racial tensions, which should also answer or speak to Obama's choices for DHS, the Muslim Brotherhood choices, selections for DHS. So I mean, this is all connected. I guess is what I'm trying to say is this is all part of a grander scheme, I believe.
Oh, I think there's no question.
Let
me put one more nail in this, and this is a substantial nail. This is not, I'm going to name a law enforcement guy who knows a general, who knows someone on the corner. This is substantial. John Moore, who's a broadcast colleague of mine at Republic, John Moore sent me a communication today, and he lives in this area. And John Moore is in communication with three people, but I'll just go to one person in specific. Now remember, I've heard from someone in law enforcement, I've heard from two talk show hosts, and another person on the ground there today. This is exactly what John Moore put into print, and I published this on my website today. It says, I have three friends involved, and one particular he names is retired Command Sergeant Major Dan Page, and he does a lot of work with the various awareness groups and so forth. Dan Page has intelligence that we have direct involvement of ISIS and the PLO on the ground in Ferguson. So we're naming names now, folks. We're talking about one of the highest-ranking officials you can have in the military, a Command Sergeant Major, who is now on the record of saying the PLO, just the very thing I've been saying, first half hour of this show, the PLO and ISIS is involved in Ferguson. And now I've got the on-the-ground report that the Sons of Anarchy are there, and God knows why. I mean, that's another wild card variable here. But, yes, you're absolutely right. This is part of a bigger picture. This is the beginning of, well, let me just share with you where it's headed in part. I heard a Fox News report today. It's outrageous that the people in the St. Louis schools would be instructed and to carry out how to protest. They should be telling these kids, go home and do your darn homework. You don't need to be on the streets doing anything where it's going to be highly dangerous. Let the authorities restore law and order. But no, they're teaching these kids how to be agitators. This is right out of the Barack Obama School of Community Agitation. And this is inexcusable. And so what's going to happen across this country? This is what I worry about. And I'm going to preface it by speaking my background. No, I'm not going to tell you, hey, one of my best friends is black. Let me tell you my background. I was a minority in elementary and middle school until we moved. I played college basketball. I coached college basketball. I've had clients who are black. So I understand the slight and subtle differences in cultural approaches to life. Although humans are humans are humans. I don't care what your skin color is. And I can tell you, to a person with the people who I've known and encountered, they are not on board with this insanity. Yeah, do they see subtle signs of racism that you and I might miss because we're white? Yeah, very likely, sure. But do they sit here and see racism in the wallpaper, and there's racism at every turn, and the way that you get equality is to burn down your neighborhood's businesses? No. They think this is just as insane as anyone else. And I'm telling you, your rank and file, a black adult is not on board with this. They have too much common sense like any other human being. But here's my concern. Children are moldable. Children can be influenced. And my concern is now they're hearing Whitey is the bad guy. Anyone wearing a badge is automatically your enemy. And you should think about doing harm to these people because they have so oppressed you. And they'll use slavery as the common denominator, even though we're 160 years past it. It's still going to be the way that some of these kids are going to be brainwashed into becoming agitators and activists. And if you think about what you see in groups like the PLO, who's in the streets throwing rocks and bottles? Kids as young as 10, 12, 13, 14. That's what they're building in Ferguson. This is what they're moving towards. And if this doesn't ring familiar, then you people out there in the listening audience do not know the Barack Hussein, Barry Soetoro that we know, because this man cut his teeth as a community activist and agitator. He's never had a real job. That's the only thing that man ever did before he got into politics. And when he got on the air last night, and this is something that I find outrageous, he came on the air and he said all the right things in the beginning. I want to join the Michael Brown family in calling for peace. If you have to protest, please do it constructively. Don't let our son's name be used for violence purposes. Beautiful, beautiful sentiment by the Brown family. And in the midst of their horrible agony and suffering, my hat is off to them. I have a deep, abiding respect for Mr. Brown, who, in the midst of this tragedy, has maintained a sense of humanity. And so Obama agrees with this sentiment, but then he turns the second half of his speech into, well, everybody knows, how am I doing there with the Obama imitation? Everybody knows that there's problems with colored communities and the white establishment. What? I'm thinking, what are you saying this for? I'm not saying that there aren't issues that we can't still work on as a country. Of course there are. But in a moment when the president has to be seen as a beacon of peace and calm and quiet and responsibility, he started agitating. Yeah, well, basically may as well say these people have a reason to be pissed off and they should burn down every building on the block. That's the meaning of what he said. There was the community activist speaking. We didn't hear from President Obama. We heard from community agitator Obama from his South Side Chicago days. And I was outraged when I heard this on the news. And it's interesting. Fox has taken some shots at the Department of Justice today, but they haven't dwelled on his speech. And there was one person I saw last night, and I was up until 3 a.m. watching this, but they had one man on who dared to speak out against the president's inappropriate incendiary remarks, and he was black. wasn't a white man that criticized the president. It was a black man, and it was an unsolicited comment, and the interviewer couldn't move away from the topic fast enough. So people, if you think you're getting real news from Fox because they sometimes criticize the president, his immigration, his health care policies, think again. They are just as controlled as the folks over at CNN or who I like to call the Communist News Network.
Fantastic. I mean, I cannot agree with you any more than that. I find it interesting, by the way, Dave. You know, you're talking about this narrative that they're pushing. The administration, the media, is pushing. Time Magazine has come out. One columnist, a Florida-based contributor to the Washington Post and Time, came out with an article titled "Ferguson in Defense of Rioting," and her name is Darlena Kuna, and she says that, look, the violent protests in Ferguson are part of the American experience. Really, peaceful protesting is a luxury only available to those safely in the mainstream culture. Really, those are her words, not mine.
I'm a black man, and my black wife and I have put our life savings into our businesses at the Ferguson market, and my business gets burned down because Holder orders the National Guard to stand down. How does that help the American experience? How does this help the plight of black people? I mean, a lot of the businesses that got burned down last night are owned by black people. Where's the outrage at this? These people did nothing to deserve this. McDonald's did nothing to deserve to get broken into and looted. Neither did Taco Bell or the liquor store or the beauty store that got burned down, which, by the way, was black-owned. What is wrong with these people's psychological mechanisms that you're making this into a race issue when really it's a criminal incident, but they're making it into a race issue, and they turn around and burn down businesses owned by people of the very race that they say they want to protect? This is craziness. Well, that's called the PLO and ISIS.
Right.
This is create more victims, make more people hate the establishment.
And folks, and if you don't, if you think this is a stretch, look at some of the images, some of the video that you can find on the internet, especially through the Twitter feed, and the images associated with that. You'll see PLO flags, you'll see Palestinian garb, attired men, women engaged in the protests. And I saw a statistic, and I'm not sure, Dave, what your thoughts on this are, but a lot of these protesters are being transported into that Ferguson area, at least Ferguson now, Ferguson today, tonight, yesterday. Who knows where it'll be, tomorrow. So we know that this is all being choreographed on a world stage.
The automatic weapon fire we heard on Fox last night is concerning. It shows you how fast it could escalate. And now you're bringing troops in. This is just an excuse to have a bloodbath. This is my fear. And let's go back to what I have said repeatedly when I've been a guest on your show in the past. This country will be taken into martial law. Why? Because no citizen of this country will support the kind of war and the foreign policy efforts that we're going to be taken into in World War III. But if we're under martial law, we're more controllable. We very possibly, by that point, most of us have lost our guns, if not all of us, most of us. And it'll be hard for us to resist being pulled into serving the bankers as we fight their third world war of unification. And first, we have to get martial law. This is the move towards martial law. I think we're going to see a reintroduction of pathogens after the first of the year for a lot of reasons, so we get a medical aspect of martial law. And I'll tell you something else, too, Doug, and this has occurred to me, and I've toyed with writing an article on this, but I can't quite put my mind around the loop, but let me tell you where my thoughts are on this. I thought, okay, this Ebola thing, and I went through the actuary of how it should have spread, and it didn't. And I said, well, gee, we're probably not dealing with Ebola or a less viral synthetic form, but what did they accomplish by having that here? And this bears on Ferguson and what's coming. So bear with me just a second here. when it was announced there was Ebola, things started surfacing like the HHS document that says we're going to quarantine people in camps. They were contracting out, and I have the documents I published for ambulance services, but yet at these camps, none of the participating agencies had any medical background. So to me, I concluded they were death camps because you only had the DOD, Department of Labor, so they were slave labor camps or death camps, but no CDC, no NIH, no Doctors Without Borders, private NGO, none of these. And so we had that. We had the president expand an executive order to include things that were ridiculous, where if you have a chest cold or asthma or something like this, you can be quarantined. And then it got expanded to, well, we can quarantine you if we think you've been exposed, even though we're not sure, if we just think. And I thought, well, that's the excuse just to pick up dissidents. We think you were near this Ebola guy. Come with us, please. And so what we look at here, and I'll spare you all the examples I could give you, but what we have in totality, what the other side accomplished was through the Ebola hoax, what we got was martial law preparedness. And we got the mechanism set up to where people would not question that the martial law forces and the containment forces of the FEMA camps are being set into motion.
I totally agree with that. And Steve Quayle's been on the program talking about the EVD, the Ebola-like, and I totally agree with you. Ebola, I mean, it's not like the old definition of pornography. You'll know when you see it. No, I mean, Ebola is it's you bleed from every orifice and capillary. I mean, it's a massive. So what we're seeing, it's not the Ebola Zaire, the traditional Ebola virus. But having said that, let me back up. I'm getting live reports here, and folks, just so you understand, we do have 3 monitors here in our studio. One is on Fox, one is on MSNBC. Yeah, I know. And the other is on CNN. Okay, so we are monitoring all the networks, or those 3 networks, I should say. And Beata, thank you for this information. She writes this, and I'm going to just share this with you, Dave. According to MyFox Chicago, in other articles, 2,200 National Guard troops are in or on their way to Ferguson. That's 2,200 National Guard troops in or around Ferguson. The other, thank you, Marie. The Fox News is on. Hang on a second here. I'm getting at it. Sin writes, that's CYN. Alex Jones is live streaming from Ferguson. The crowds are gathering slowly, but are growing bigger as the hours pass by. And indeed, she writes, there is a military presence there. And finally, and you'll like this one, and you'll certainly relate to this one, William R. Thank you so much, William, for writing. He writes that he is sharing contemporaneous your information. As you are speaking the information, the updates you're providing, he is posting to Facebook. However, and here's the caveat, Facebook is censoring these updates. They're not showing up in the posts and the timelines since you started talking about this. Surprise, right?
Yes. And let's take this back to the original Ground Zero event. What's now coming out from the evidence that released from the grand jury trial was that Michael Brown, as tragic as his death is, and listen, I don't say this with false sincerity. I'm a father. I can't imagine losing a son this way. I feel horrible for the Brown family. But Michael Brown reached inside the police cruiser, and he went for Officer Wilson's gun. That's how he got shot in the thumb. That's how a bullet went into the door panel, and another bullet was discharged they never found. But when you go for an officer's gun, that warrants a deadly response. I'm sorry, but that's how the game is played, and you can't do something to endanger the life of an officer and not expect to pay the ultimate price. And that's the Ground Zero. This is a legal issue. I mean, what would they have done had Officer Wilson been black or Filipino or Japanese descent? Where would the argument be there? This was a law enforcement issue. This man was a fleeing felon. He had already strong-armed robbery in a convenience store. He refused the officer's orders to go to the sidewalk, and then he attacks the officer and goes for his gun. And we're surprised that Michael Brown was shot and killed, especially when black witnesses, and I want to emphasize that here, and it's not like black people can't tell the truth. I'm not implying that. But for the naysayers who think that Brown was murdered, black witnesses have said he turned and charged at the officer, and this is after he already made a play for his gun. Why wouldn't the officer reasonably believe that's what's going to happen again? Of course he had to shoot him.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous. The only people that want to make this about race are the people, and I mean this sincerely. To me, it doesn't matter. A life is a life. A life is precious. Black, white, purple, green. I mean, it doesn't matter your race. It's precious. Life is precious. So the only people that want to make this about race are the very people who want to see this country divided and rejoice and revel in the fact that there is divisiveness still they're able to divide us. And the only way that to destroy, one of the only ways, or one of the most effective ways, I've got Rules for Radicals right here on my desk, right here. That's Rules for Radicals. I've got the book, never mind, Tragedy and Hope. That Carol Quigley talks about the exploitation of crises, and other books as well. Okay.
Why don't we do this now? We're 5 minutes past the top. Why don't we take a quick break? Dave, catch his breath, get something to drink. We'll let you get your books together, and we'll come back after these short messages. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, November 25th, 2014. We have Dave Hodges as our guest. Stan Deo, we asked if he wouldn't mind sitting this Tuesday out so we could have Dave on and talk about this pivotal information pertaining to Ferguson and what we're seeing not only in Ferguson but cities across the United States now as violence and protests continue to rage and revamp on the heels of the grand jury non-indictment from yesterday's Officer Wilson Darren Brown case. We'll be right back after these short messages, gentlemen, to our third and final hour of this Tuesday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, today being November 25th, 2014. We are joined by our current guest, Mr. Dave Hodges. His website is commonsenseshow.com. He hosts a show every Sunday night, and he is talking about Ferguson, the various government involvement, agency involvements in Ferguson, stemming from rogue agencies to active agencies, and all that falls in between as we see the further descent into chaos, and not only in Ferguson but in other areas around the country, protests, riots, National Guard, and the setup for martial law. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave and let you jump in right where you left off.
Well, something new has come in. Fortunately, I don't read Arabic, and I know it's right to left, but I got all the squiggly lines here. It's a tweet, and it's got a picture of guys with guns and hoods on, and is the picture, but obviously it's not a Christmas card.
If you want to send it to me, Dave, I'll have it translated in about a minute. So if you've got the ability to send it to us, we can have it translated.
Yeah, let me.
All right. Wow.
I will grab this.
Okay. And while you're doing that, folks, evidence is mounting. Now, this from the Common Sense Show. Dave Hodges wrote this. Evidence is mounting that ISIS is helping to incite the Ferguson riots. And please go to thecommonsenseshow.com. Top story, written today. Breaking news: the CIA controlled ISIS is everywhere. And if you look at the photograph, you can see ISIS is here. And the sign in the background, of course, taken in Ferguson, Missouri, 9:17 p.m. yesterday. Man,
what's the chilling? Don't give out your email, but what's the first initial for either one of your emails? Because I'm having trouble locating it.
Okay, you can go to D.
Okay,
D
all
for
right.
Doug. There you go. And we'll get that translated right away.
Yeah, I know. If I give out my email very many times, I don't leave my office that day. So I know what you're talking about here. I'm scrolling down here.
Or very simply, Dave, if you want to, if this is easier, you just go to hagmannhagmann.com, and there's a if you're attaching something or embedding something, you can just send it to.
I got a copy and paste of it.
Okay, so you can go to hagmannhagmann.com and insert it in the contact us box. On the top is a contact us form, and you can just insert it in there.
You know, I apology to everyone who said we're under Muslim invasion, because I thought, well, I understand there's problems, and I understand they're trying to impose their will to some degree on us, but okay, so someone's playing games with my computer, guys. That just took me down.
You know, that's to be expected in this time. And
this is unbelievable. My screen just blanked out here. So it's okay. I got my tablet right here.
Of course, I'm sure somebody will say, well, you just bumped the cord or something like that, but we've seen this happen in real time.
No, the battery's good. Oh, this is live radio here. This is good, folks. This is how we get messed with on a regular basis.
And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't believe that this does happen in real time. That this could only happen to Cheryl Atkinson or somebody that for example, that's willing to write a book and talk about it. Not to take anything away from Cheryl Atkinson, of course, no way. But you know it.
Okay, I'm on my tablet, and I got the Hagmann and Hagmann. I got
.com. Yeah, Hagmann.com. If you go on you can do one of two things. You can go to contact us, or go to on the left. There's you can on our names on the left-hand column or on the top right. Either way.
Okay, got it. How to go to contact us. Okay, that's going to give me a better venue. I've got another communication here too that says that tonight I'm out on the street, and tonight is much more calm than it was last night.
Well,
okay.
I'm wondering if the 2,200 National Guard troops finally released have anything to do with it, or is there anything left to burn down? I don't know. I'm
entitling this translation, okay, so you can see it here.
Okay.
I've got it in there, and it transferred perfectly. So I was kind of concerned about that. Would this transfer cleanly? Because, these aren't your typical keyboard characters as we understand them here in the West. So I'm putting in your security code, and I'm sending. I didn't do it right. let me work on this, but let's move on here. I couldn't ask your security.
Sven, if you're listening, we got something coming to you. All right, there we go. I got something here, my friend. So, all right, take it away. We'll get this. Get this done here. Yep, got it.
You got it. Okay, good. All right. I don't know what this says. I suspect it's good because the photo in the background is not friendly. The hoods, the black hoods, the weapons, and I'm looking at Fox right now, guys, and they keep putting on the attorney for Michael Brown's family. How many times are we going to beat this dead horse? And then I see Al Sharpton here. They're showing him on there. Al Sharpton, I wrote this today. If Al Sharpton depends on racism like an oncologist depends on cancer to make a living. If we solve the racism problem, that man would have to go out and get a real job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have no these race baiters. They see race in the wallpaper, and I'm sick of it. It's time to call it out. This isn't to impugn anyone of color. It's to impugn someone of bad character.
There you go. Very important. Very important.
And I'm sorry, guys, but this is how I see it. No, I'm not sorry. I don't apologize for this at all. Boy, is my mailbox filling up, guys, from people in. I've got a lady who used to write news script for a major news outlet. She's sending me stuff, And it's basically Ferguson's on high alert is what this says. Troops are here, blah, 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 blah. Same thing we've been talking about. Okay, so where does all this head? This is, if I were listening right now, this is what I'd want to know, but I have to tell you, this is what yours truly wants to know, too. Where I think this is headed is this is nudging us along the corridor of more of a police state, moving us a step closer to martial law, authoritarian rule by the military or paramilitary forces. I think the next step in this, there's a reason why they let MS-13 come across the border, and they came across in groups. I want to stress this. They came across in groups. So why would they let the assassins for the Sinaloa cartel come across in groups? That doesn't make any sense. What's their job? They assassinate people. I think we know what the second wave is going to be. I think this racism thing is just the first shot across the bow. I believe it is going to spread, but I think there's going to be more. And I'm going to tie something else into this, guys. Obama, not long ago, 5 days ago, 6 days ago, made a speech on his executive action to give amnesty effectively to 5 million, which is really closer to about 25 million. And nobody's happy. The immigrant population wasn't happy with him. He didn't go far enough. Traditional Americans who believe in following the law and following our immigration laws are unhappy. Well, what does this promote? This promotes legal versus illegal, to some degree brown versus white, the white establishment in particular. So it's more race baiting on the part of this president. I don't think these things are happening in isolation. You're looking at Hagel being out because he's loyal to generals. And what would generals have to do? Well, order the final steps of taking care of Americans. And then you find that Obama's race baiting through the immigration issue, and they're clearly race baiting here in Ferguson. He's basically trying to whip this country up into a civil war.
You know, when I wrote about this, Dave, 2 years ago, my DHS insider source said that they are planning to take us into a civil war. I was just vilified. It's across the internet, and everything that this individual, my source, had said is now coming to pass, including, I asked, the timing of all this, and he said, watch when the metals get smacked down. Watch for some things to start happening, and here that's the timeline is pretty accurate. Now we're seeing this exacerbation of the situation into a civil war. So I've got to tell you, you know what, Dave, and we've spoken off air. I really believe that Obama was selected for this time and for this purpose. So I mean, I think that this is not chaos. This is orchestrated chaos, I should say.
I've written about this extensively, as I'm sure you know. The Soviet defectors that came to us, Bezmenov and Lunev and all these people, Golitsyn, they all say the same thing, that the Soviets knew that they couldn't beat us, in a global war, so they decided to undermine us from the inside. And Obama is the manifestation of that. And before people roll their eyes, let me explain briefly. Obama's mother, Ann Dunham, actually worked for Tim Geithner's father in the CIA-sponsored PSYOPs operative, the Ford Foundation. That's not a fait accompli, but the next thing is. Most of Obama's family can be linked into MK Ultra experiments that were done at the University of Hawaii, and people can go to my website and Google that on the search engine and detail that for themselves. But then where it gets really interesting is our old mutual friend, the late Larry Grathwohl, came into our lives, and he was an informant for the FBI with regard to his penetration and infiltration of the Weatherman Underground, headed by Bill Ayers and now his wife, Bernadine Dorn, who served jail time. Ayers served jail time, too. And a lot of people think the Weathermen were no more than just a hippie radical group that was opposed to the Vietnam War in the 60s, and that's not true. What we know is that the Weathermen were the sons and daughters of Ivy League people, corporate people like Bill Ayers' dad. Tom Ayers was the head of Con Ed of Illinois, and these Ivy League graduates went on to become Weathermen Underground. They weren't your hippies. They were highly successful people from high-level corporate families, but who embraced communism, and they wanted a corporatocracy of a communist bent. And that's what the Weathermen were about. I mean, they forged relations with Castro, with North Vietnam. Ted Turner's former wife, Jane Fonda, embraced them. And so what do you have? You have Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn in the 1980s became involved with Barack Hussein Obama, and then into the 90s they launched his state senatorial campaign from their home in Chicago. And Joe Arpaio, the sheriff here in Maricopa County where I live, he investigated the birth certificate issue, and he found evidence to the fact that Obama had been identified himself to the local postman, Hutton, as being a foreign student who is going to, quote, to become the president. And this is an affidavit. This isn't something that's hearsay. It's part of an official investigation by a sheriff. So we go forward with this, and who else is involved with Dohrn and Ayers and Obama? Well, Vernon Jarrett. Vernon Jarrett, an avowed communist, the father-in-law of senior White House advisor Valerie Jarrett. There was an intermarriage between the Bill Ayers family and the Jarrett family. And here Valerie Jarrett, despite her criminal background of being a slumlord queen at the Garden Grove Apartments, and she was fired for corruption by Mayor Daley. Imagine that, being fired by Mayor Daley for corruption. That she's fired by him, but somehow she gets to be White House senior advisor. And Rahm Emanuel, all these people that have infested the White House and infected Americans were part of these organizations that grew out of this, and they were all avowed communists. Obama's real father, Frank Marshall Davis, was on the FBI watch list for years. And I'll give you something chilling here, folks. Bill Ayers still visits the White House. He still has a relationship with Obama. And Larry Grathwohl told this story on my show where he said he sat down with Bill Ayers once and he said, well, what will you do if you ever take over the country? And he seemed surprised by the question, and he sat back and he said, well, the first thing we'll have to do is put people in re-education camps in the Southwest. And he said, well, how many, Bill? And he said, about 50 million Americans. And we'll probably have to do away with, meaning murder, about 25 million Americans. That's the mindset of the person who launched this president's political career. So when we look at, you said this has been a long-time plot, match that versus what the Soviet defector said. Match that with the communist leanings of the Weathermen Underground and Obama's parents' mysterious associations with people who do not have this country's best interest at heart. And what you have is a Manchurian candidate operating inside the White House.
Well, we do. I mean, there is absolutely no way around this. We have a the guy in the White House, and Dave, you and I talked about this, we don't even know his true name. We have no clue as to what his true name is. The last known real name that we have for him is Barry Soetoro. That's number one. Number two, we do know that his parents, ostensibly his parents, were heavily into the CIA, connected to CIA. We know, of course, the Subud, S-U-B-U-D, cult influence that not only had overtaken his parents, but also perhaps Obama, as well as many of his appointments. We know Muslim Brotherhood is involved in this. We know, the CIA, like I said, is heavily involved in this. It's incredible. And you know what gets me is when we brought this up for the eligibility issue, no one wanted to hear about it. Hannity didn't want to hear about it. Limbaugh didn't want to hear about it. Levin didn't want to hear about it. No one wanted to hear about it. No one gave a damn about this information. And now here we are, the enemy's within the gates, and here's what we face. I look at the monitor and I cry. And then and I'll tell you this, maybe this maybe this is Well, no, I'm just gonna go off with this. Then I got this sniveling email from this so-called minister named Carr saying that I'm done with you all. That Dave Hodges himself put the nail in the coffin for racial tension. How in the hell, Carr, do you figure this? Okay, I marvel at how you European Americans think that you know everything. Well, when in the hell have we said that, Carr? You're a real minister? May the blood of Jesus reveal your arrogance to you, is how he closes his 2.5 paragraph diatribe. Well, I'll tell you something, okay? Stick your head back up your rectal cranial. Dave, you better take it before I burst.
I'm biting my tongue here, too. Let me just answer that by saying, let's talk about Obama. And, of course, if you criticize this man, you're a racist. But I'll just defend my statements by saying this. Bruce Dodge, Jim Brandenburg, Aurora Hinckley, Irene Raritan. Now, who are those people? Bruce Dodge was my best friend through high school and for several years after. Jim Brandenburg was my high school basketball coach, who also went on to coach at 3 different universities, very well known, guided 3 teams to the NCAA tournament. Irene Raritan was my homecoming date in my junior year. Lovely, lovely girl. I was too stupid to know how good I had it at that time, although I married up, so all things end well. My point is, I can name my background. I can tell you about who was Obama's prom date, who was his high school basketball coach, what high school did he go to, why is there a presidential seal on his transcripts? I don't care, Mr. President, you got bad grades, you're articulate as hell, and you got through Harvard. You got a brain. There's no questioning that. So show us who you are. But no, he can't do that. He can't do what any of us can do. He can't do what I recall. I've been studying a lot about John Kennedy again and reading his words of wisdom. And there's a guest you should have on. He's done a 90-minute documentary, and I'll forward this to you, on the betrayal of JFK. And he doesn't get into the assassination. It's just how he was undermined in his own government. And I've been reading supporting documents, and I watched his video, and I've got him on. He's coming on in December on my show. But with John Kennedy and the archival footage, we know a lot of things he did. We know where he went to school. We know his brother Teddy got caught cheating and, a mistake of youth indiscretion. We know a lot of this stuff about our presidents. We knew about Bill Clinton's deprived background. We know how his mom persevered through very, very difficult circumstances and abusive circumstances. And Bill Clinton, I'm not a fan of Bill Clinton, but I do admire how he overcame the odds to become the President of the United States in his terribly deprived background, which I think really scarred his personality. But we know all these things about these presidents. Why don't we know anything about this guy? Because he is a CIA Manchurian candidate. And there is no other way to put it. And, of course, they had to make him black because that makes him immune to criticism, because then all the racial taunts come out.
Truth be told, he's 88% Arab, but not black. But,
Ramadan Kari, as he once said in public when he refused to participate in the National Day of Prayer.
Yeah.
Ramadan Kari, Mr. President.
Honest to goodness, this wow. Yeah, all of this, it just strains credulity. As I look at the monitors here and I see what's taking place in Ferguson, and here we are, it really rips my heart out to think what we're leaving to our children. We might not be around to see how this ends, you or I or Joe. I don't know. I just don't know. But I can tell you this. I just look at this and say, what have we done? What have we allowed to happen? And what are we allowing to happen? And
Obama has set race relations back in this country 60 years. And for your reverend that wrote in, I forget his name, Carr.
Carr, whatever.
Reverend Carr.
I sent you the email.
Very carefully. One of the people that I constantly cite as a great and peaceful revolutionary, not a perfect man, but a man of God nonetheless, a man who brought change to a nation, a man who wanted justice for all people, not just his people, was Martin Luther King. We don't have a man like that in the White House. We have a gifted, articulate man that we know nothing about, and he does not serve the ideals of this country. And to Reverend Carr, let me say something to you, sir. Part of me rejoiced when Barack Obama got elected because I thought it showed a sign of the healing times that we lived in, the time of unity, where, as Martin Luther King said, judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Part of me rejoiced. I also was fearful of what we were getting with such an inexperienced president who we knew so little about with his background, and my fear was well-founded. But, sir, I say to you, I rejoiced in the election of this president from the aspect of harmonizing this country on a single purpose, and I was hoping he would do what he said he would do, bring health care to those who had it, not wreck the health care of people who already had it. I thought he would restore the economy by stopping the reckless wars of occupation that were bankrupting our country. I thought he would carry out these promises. I had hope when he elected, although my little voice told me there ain't no way in hell he'll do this. And I rejoiced in the possibility of revolutionary change. I thought we had a man like John Kennedy. I prayed for his safety for the same reasons that John Kennedy was dealt with. I thought that this president, if he carries out his edicts and his promises, that he would be dealt with in the same fashion. And I thought only God's light could shine down and protect him. And I prayed for this president when he took over. Now I pray that we find a way to put him out of office using the impeachment process, except Congress doesn't have a spine. This man is not a champion of the people. In fact, I would say this to all people out there, all people who are black, yellow, white, brown, it doesn't make any difference. Can you name one thing? Please tell me one thing that this man has done to improve your life as a middle-class American. What has he done? I ask this question repeatedly, and I hear crickets chirping in the background. No one can tell me even one thing he has done to help us. He is on a one-man wrecking crew mission to destroy this country, and all you have to do to see the result of his race baiting and the race baiting of his minions like Eric Holder is to turn on your damn TV and watch these pictures I'm watching now.
It's sad. It really is. Frosty Woolridge wrote a piece here, and thank you, MJ, for sending this. Emperor Obama dismantling our Constitution, and this Frosty talks about this past week Obama illegally mandating that our laws as a sovereign country mean nothing through his overstepping process through executive order, letting the illegal aliens, giving them amnesty. It's just incredible, It really is what we're seeing take place. But you know what, Dave? I mean, it transcends any political paradigm. It's both Republican and Democrat. We know this, but
yes, I do. I know that we don't have political parties. The right-left paradigm is a myth. Sven sent me, I believe you, the translation. And let me read it, but I have a question for Sven. Maybe he can email us an answer if he has one. The translated text is Allah Akbar, and a proper name, possibly bin Khalid. And I don't know if this is it, but let me go back to the name I gave to you earlier, is one of the agitators with terrorist connections, Khalid Abdul Muhammad. I don't know if that's the same person.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's right. You did. Okay.
I suspect it is.
I'll follow that up.
But perhaps Sven can maybe shed a little more light if he can do so. And thank you, Sven, for doing that, because I certainly can't read right to left. And no insult to the Arabic language. I read English. There's a question that came in to me, and I think it was directed to both of us. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read this. It's from, don't think they signed it. It says, could you ask Mr. Hodges if he has any evidence of Mr. Putin or Mr. Maduro involved in the Ferguson riots? No, I don't. I don't see a strong Russian connection, or maybe even any Russian connection, with these Middle Eastern terrorist groups and what they're doing here. I'm not saying they don't cross over at some point. Doug, how about you? Do you see a connection between Putin and what's going on?
You know, I kind of do, and here's, I'll just lay it out briefly. We, through our Arab Spring, had started something in the Middle East. This power, we had attempted and had done a great job in screwing around with the power structure in the Middle East. We had gone after Syria. Putin said, "Don't do that. Syria is our red line in the sand."
Right.
So we stopped doing that for a while because of the public outcry. The chemical weapons attack didn't work. Now, I'm just asking people to kind of step out and take a wider view of this. Okay, fine. So that didn't work. So we stopped going through the front door, beating on the front door of Syria. And what happened was, at least in my view, and based on information I've gotten from my intelligence insider sources, is that we essentially created ISIS by leaving the equipment, the weapons, and everything else there in the Middle East. And what ISIS is doing, among everything else, in addition to attempting to create this caliphate, is to destabilize Syria. So they've opened up, essentially the Western intelligence, including the CIA and Great Britain, as well as the Saudis, we've opened up this new front against Syria to destabilize Syria and to take out Assad. Alternatively, or consequently, Putin, he's no dummy. I mean, I'm not going to deify the guy, but he's not stupid. What he's done is played asymmetrically, and of course, I do suspect that he could perhaps influence our internal domestic tranquility by using some of our own assets against us. So, are there Putin?
Sure, I agree with you on that. I do.
Okay.
We know there are Russian troops inside this country. We know some of them are Spetsnaz. So I do agree with that they can have that influence. But do you think they're really with the agitators on the ground in Ferguson? That's how I interpreted his question.
Oh. Wow, I don't know. I suspect that maybe 2 or 3 steps removed, but I think that there is some level of influence. Do you think so? I mean,
no. I don't see any direct evidence, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's always. It's kind of like the communist factor. I mean, I believe that Joe McCarthy was correct. When he did his McCarthy, or when he did his communist hearings in the 50s, but I also think that that was people exploited his findings and made it absurd, and I think that perhaps there is Russian influence here in Ferguson as well as other cities, but people take it to perhaps an extreme, and then people don't understand exactly what's taking place.
Well, FEMA has a bilateral agreement with the Russians, and they signed this a year and a half ago, and it called for bringing in 15,000 Russian troops for bilateral training. And that was signed in conjunction with Dmitry, the foreign minister of Russia. So that's people like to argue with me on this point. And there is no argument because we have official documents that show this. We have pictures of Russian soldiers training with American soldiers and posing for pictures at Fort Carson, so in Colorado Springs. So there's no question this is going on. I mean, the Russians will be involved in martial law, as will the Chinese. Let's make no mistake about it. You have to have 1 soldier per 50 citizens to garrison a country. The DHS, they might have 2.2 billion rounds of new ammunition and 2,700 armored personnel carriers. They can't garrison this country. It's going to take a large, substantial force to do that. So this is where we're headed. I mean, we are headed for martial law lockdown. There is no question about it. And we will eventually fight a third world war. And I don't know if that war will be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. But this is where we're headed. This is the end of America. And I can't stress that enough. I mean, what we see in Ferguson right now out of necessity, I don't blame the police, I don't blame the public officials, but we're watching martial law in effect. And when they take the next step to clear the streets, if this goes on a couple more nights, they're going to impose a curfew, just like they did before. And then we'll see true martial law again in American City. And this is just the beginning, folks. Martial law is coming to your neighborhood.
You know what I find surreal, and I'm going to turn this over to Joe, and I'm sure you're looking at the same thing, and anyone listening to this program, watching at home and watching their TVs, I find it surreal to see the police in riot gear, the demonstrations, the riots, the burning, and in the background you see Season's greetings across the street.
Yeah.
And then the sign. It's the sign that's draped across the...
I was wondering that. I've seen that a couple of times, and I just got an email similar to what you got. It's from Carr.
Yeah, I sent that to you, Dave. I forwarded it.
Oh, you did? You forwarded that to me?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Oh, he sent it to me directly. This is direct mail from him. He just this. Yeah, he decided to seek me out. Your judgment that Michael Brown brought the situation on himself is ludicrous. Well, you go for a cop's gun, that's what happens. A grand jury said that there were conflicting accounts. Well, they didn't indict him, so they went with the account that supported the officer's narrative. It says it's likely that George Bush and Cheney set up 9/11. We're not talking about 9/11. It said, did you know Andrew Jackson defied a Supreme Court order and sent the Cherokee Indian? Okay, that has nothing to do with this. Okay, that was different time, different place. He's basically playing the race card through history. Let me say this to Mr. Carr here. This is very, 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 very heartfelt. Two scenarios. One scenario is our government has been hijacked by bankers. And if you don't believe me, what do you think the bailouts are? We owe them $1.5 quadrillion, and there's only $79 trillion of wealth in the entire planet. We are debt slaves forever. We could pay off every dime we make to the derivatives debt, and we could be paying into the 30th century, and it wouldn't make any difference. The debt has outpaced our earning potential. We can't even service the interest on the derivatives debt. We are owned by the bankers. They have hijacked our government. In fact, the bankers have hijacked every central government of any substance on this planet. So they are the enemy of humanity. They are depriving you and your children of a future. This isn't a black or white issue. This is an economic issue. This is an issue of economic slavery. This is an issue of feudalism being imposed upon the United States people, and we're all victims in an equal way. And this is being done in Ferguson and across the country to usher in martial law, but also there's a divide and conquer psyops element to this, to where if we don't unite, if we don't fight if we keep fighting with each other, we won't see the real enemy here. And the real enemy are the puppets in the White House and this administration that serve the banksters, and they are our enemy. And that's true for a person of every race and every religion. And there's something else to be considered. When we are invaded in the Red Dawn scenario that I think will overtake us in World War III, when the Chinese tanks come down the street, they're not going to give a damn if your skin is black or white. They're going to blow you away. And the sooner we realize that we're all in this together, all races, all religions of Americans, we're fighting for our very right to exist, we can maybe stop these Fergusons and turn our emotions to where they belong, are the criminals that inhabit our White House, our Congress, our Supreme Court, and make wholesale changes in government as a united people, regardless of our race. That's where we need to channel this.
Amen. Absolutely. And like you said, it doesn't matter the skin color. They are going to be coming for us, whether through martial law via racial chaos or EMP, economic breakdown. It is going to happen one way or another, and they will be coming. And it's that plain and simple. And we need to, instead of tearing down each other, unify under the idea that we can put up a fight against this to restore some sense of community, because of the way we are looking now, so many people divided against each other for whatever reason they have. It's divide and conquer. This is what they want. They're afraid of a unification of the people.
Exactly.
And for good reason.
And And by the way, Dave, you mentioned this, and thank you for sending this, Michael. Curfew already declared in East St. Louis for those 17 years old and younger. They're not allowed out after 6 p.m. This was announced by the Illinois State Police. So, de facto martial law, indeed, at least in that respect.
That's a good move. We don't need kids on the street putting themselves in harm's way, doing something for which no good can come. I totally agree with that. But Joe, I agree with wholeheartedly with what you just said. We need to heal. We need to unify and realize that we're being provoked. The same side is poking a stick in everyone's eye and getting us to point at each other than the real fault here. Let me give you a statistic here, and for black people who are listening to me, and you think Obama is your friend, and you think that I'm being racist because I don't support this president, and I think he's the worst president in American history, including Woodrow Wilson, let me give you a statistic. Under Obama, we have slipped to the point where we have 97 million working Americans. We have an estimated 110 million Americans who are on some form of public welfare assistance. How is that good for a person? Welfare is something that's supposed to get you over a stretch of difficulty through no fault of your own. You work hard, you overcome it, you get off the welfare, and you move on with your life. That's the purpose. It's not meant to be permanent subsistence. And what you get when you keep people on welfare and you keep it going for generations, and a good number of these people are black, and when you do this to people, you don't teach them anything about ambition. You induce a condition called learned helplessness. And let me explain that very quickly. A psychologist by the name of Dr. Seligman did a 3-part experiment on a dog. He shocked the dog on an electric grid, and the dog jumped off the grid. The second part, he built a fence around the grid, shocked the dog, and the dog yelped and screamed and tried to jump over the fence but couldn't give up and eventually just laid down and took the shocks. And then in the third phase, Seligman removed the barrier around the electric grid and shocked the dog. And you think the dog would run off the grid, but it didn't. It just laid there and passively accepted the shock. And he termed this condition learned helplessness. This is what you get when you have welfare people that are on welfare for generations. You get conditions known as learned helplessness. This president in 6 years has helped to perpetuate and increase this. And not only that, didn't he cut back on welfare payments, I believe, by something around the tune of $36 a month? So unless you're cheating on welfare, that was a significant reduction. I wouldn't call a man who basically took about 1/8 of my welfare payment away as my friend. I wouldn't call that man who hasn't increased my academic opportunities in higher centers of education. He hasn't done anything for black education. He's done nothing, no thing. You know, even Lyndon Johnson, as despicable as he was, did more for the cause of black civil rights and helping to further black people than this current president who professes to be black. And I agree with, Doug, what you're saying. That's even called into question. But let's assume for the sake of his argument, he is black. He's done nothing to help the plight of black people. He's made the situation worse economically. And it's a mystery to me how people can support him. Now, not everyone does. There was a video that was sent to me. I can't remember if it was my news director or who sent this to me, but I'm sure you remember this. The president was going to speak a few weeks ago in a Maryland high school gymnasium, and the audience was almost exclusively black. And as the president began to speak, they all got up and walked out on him in a protest for how bad a job they thought he was doing. So I'll tell you, a lot of black people don't support him. A lot of black people who I know, who I work with, who I go to lunch with, they don't like him. They can't wait till he's out of office. They don't see him as being a positive change agent. So I don't know why people like this Reverend Carr thinks that because we're criticizing what is based on fact, the facts of the economy don't lie. He's bad for everybody, not just black people, everybody. Reverend Carr, I don't know how you can support this man.
It is the rectal cranial inversion effect at high gear. I got to tell you.
Glad I wasn't drinking something when you said that.
Well, I'm not sure if he needs to see a general surgeon or a proctologist, but certainly one of them would be in order. We're getting here down to the wire. Dave, we're followers, we're admirers of your work. You do such great work. I mean, such detail to your investigations, your reports, and of course, folks, thecommonsenseshow.com. But if I can just trouble you for a moment here, what we're seeing as a group of watchmen, and I hope we can live up, Joe and I can live up to that characterization of watchmen, because what we're seeing here is this vilification, this takedown. We got the email tonight about someone trying to post to Facebook and their comments being censored. We are so much under attack, and I know I can feel it, and I'm experiencing it, and I know you are too. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Hodges is one of the quietest guys I know. He'll never say anything, what's going on with him, and I certainly am not going to break any confidences. But I'll tell you one thing, he's certainly bearing the brunt of a lot of campaigns against him. Rick Wiles, our brother, as well. Under surveillance and harassment. Steve Quayle getting it too. I mean, it just seems like the plug has been pulled, and we're getting it from all sides, Dave, aren't we? I mean, it's just
why
crazy.
we're bad guys? Even if we eliminated all our criticisms of Holder and Obama and company, we would still get it. We would get it because, number one, we're Christians, and Christians are on the way out as far as the New World Order. And number two, we support the Constitution. Well, the Constitution empowers the average person and protects the average person from tyrannical government. And because we support those two ideals, we would still be attacked whether or not we said a negative word about Obama or not. And people like Reverend Carr, and I don't mean to harp on him, but people like him, people who think like him, need to realize we're being persecuted for the freedoms of what we had, past tense. They're trying to extinguish and choke the life out of this country. And this is where it's going, folks. And if you want your kids to have a future, I don't care what your race is or what your religion is, if you want your kids to have a future, you need to join as one collective voice to fight against this tyranny, because we're not just going to see this in Ferguson, we're going to see this all across the country, and pretty soon we'll wake up and your son and daughters will look at you and say, Mommy and Daddy, what did you do to help save America, and why did we lose that war?
Very well said. And very well said. Folks, before we cut Dave loose and before the program's over, I just want to mention real quick one more time, because please take advantage of this. Go to HagmannHagmann.com. The White Wednesday sale, American Survival Wholesale, begins at 12:01 tonight Pacific time, folks. Go to HagmannHagmann.com, click on the graphic or click on the story, and then within the article, there's a link there over American Survival Wholesale. But anyway, I wanted to mention that before we close. But Dave, you got the last word, my friend. I mean, I
want to say, first of all, when Joe said that they were going to move Stan, I didn't know he was talking about Stan Deyo. I've been an admirer of Stan Deyo since before I ever got involved in this work. I used to listen to him on Coast to Coast, and I just think the world of he and Holly. They do such great work, and I'm a great fan and admirer of theirs. So, Stan, I'm sorry. I might not have agreed to come on had I known it was you. But Doug and Joe, I want to say this to you from the bottom of my heart. In this movement I've been involved in to try to restore America and give our kids a future, I've been able to meet such great and wonderful people such as yourselves, the Hagmans, such as Steve Quayle, John B. Wells, and a whole host of other people, and just people who write to me on my email and listen to my show and contact me that way. I have faith that we have the character and the strength out there if we can just unify. We have wonderfully strong, moral people that if we could just get on the same page, we could really move a long way towards getting some of our rights back, installing, really what's the last days is inevitable. I mean, John speaks of this in Revelation. But we're not going to push it back entirely, but we can push it back some, and we may push it back far enough that we give the next generation a chance at a life that most of us have had. But we've got to get on the same page. And if what Doug and I and Joe have said tonight have moved you at all and have encouraged you, please act on that. Wake up other people, and we need to push back. We need to push back hard.
Amen.
Amen to that, my friend. We hold you in high esteem, high regard, and we just I got to tell you, you do such great work. The commonsenseshow.com, folks. Dave Hodges, please certainly connect with him on Facebook, all social media, as well as the Common Sense Show. Support Mr. Hodges any way you can, and please, folks, understand that Dave is one of us through and through. He's a great guy, and I'm just so happy to have the opportunity to. We are, Joe and I are, to be friends with you and colleagues as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very mutual. And like I said, it's a great honor to come on, and my apologies to Stan, and I mean that sincerely.
Well, we love Stan Deo and Holly Deo. We just want to make sure that he's okay. And you know, it's a holiday week, and well, I'll tell you, like I said at the beginning of the show, if his back is anything like mine, man, I'd be stretched out in front of a warm fire. But no problem, buddy.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's always a great honor to be on with you, and look forward to talking to you guys real soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, Dave. God bless you. Thanks again for your time. You have a great night, and if we don't talk, have a great holiday with you and your family. God bless them, too, and we'll keep you guys in our prayers.
Listening. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too, sir.
Until tomorrow, we'll be back with Douglas Perriman. He is the author of Dead Sea Souls and a few other books. You're not going to want to miss tomorrow's show. It's going to be fantastic. A new guest with a great perspective. Until then, stay safe, God bless, and have a great night.